I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:30. And do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Approval of minutes for November 28th. The one thing I had was, there they are.
Number 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made a motion that, the approval of minutes, that I had made a motion to approve them.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't present then. I wasn't present for the November 7th meeting. So I said that I was going to recuse myself from.
So where did I come up with that?
I don't know. It's good though. You almost has. And other than that, okay, thank you.
Yep,
So
so
Steve made a motion to pass the minutes with the amendment of, I didn't vote to approve the minutes on the last one, but other than that. Second?
Seconded.
All right, moved and seconded to approve the minutes of November 28th, as presented with one correction. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment on items not on the agenda. I think everybody is here for a reason, so I'm guessing maybe not public comment, but just want to, Karen suggested it's a good idea just to mention that today is the service for President Bush, and that just that's an important marker for time passing and a reminder of the complication of the politics we have today. Just remarkable how things have shifted over that period of time. So thank you to him for his service. Select board items. BCTV, 4, that would be you.
Is that me? I'm up first? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for having me here. My name is Trowbridge, and I'm a resident of Putney since 1992, and I'm the executive director of BCTV. I sent you a letter last week alerting you to the fact that the FCC has made a proposal that would affect the majority of our funding source. And I wanted to come before you and just talk a little bit about it, make you aware, talk about some of the scenarios, and I got a couple of action items for you. So one is BCTV has been covering the select board meeting since 2011 when we signed a contract with Comcast Cable, also town meeting day. And since then, we've covered some of the school board meetings, Act 46 meetings, and we also provide our residents with public access services, which means anybody can come and learn how to make a video and put it on cable and online. And some of our residents here is Wendy O'Connell, produces a show called Here We Are. Mike Mrowcki produces Montpelier Connection. Our Vermont Poet Laureate, Chard Denord, has a show called Poets Speak. And we cover the Putney Craft Tour, events at the library, and Landmark College academic speakers and their graduations. So actually for a small town, one of our 8 towns, Putney is very active in BCTV. We produce 1,200 hours of new local content each year. About 500 hours of that is by volunteers, and about 700 hours of that is by staff field producers, like our dedicated Janice right here. The Federal Communications Commission has issued a rulemaking, and please interrupt me with questions if you want, because you probably have glanced over that letter that I sent.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't, it's not
You
in the
didn't-
packet.
It's not in the packet? Okay. Well, I've got one here that's actually a little bit more in depth. Would you rather have it while I'm talking?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josh, yours is in color. You're so important.
Thank you.
Sorry. And so this is a follow-up to the letter that I emailed, just asking to be on the agenda. But I'm just going to take you through this. And as I said, please feel free to interrupt with questions, because something to get your head around. the way that BCTV is funded, and the reason why we have not come to you for funding every year, is that public access stations, community media stations are funded through local cable subscriber fees. So there is a small percent, 5% of the local cable subscriber fees comes to BCTV for all the towns that it's designated for. And for that, the towns have gotten coverage of their municipal meetings and also these public access services, access to the channel. That is known as a franchise fee. So what the FCC is proposing is to change the rules around that, to say that, yes, there's this franchise fee, but that the cable operator can deduct whatever value they want to place on an in-kind service, such as connecting BCTV to the channel, something like that. These in-kind services can be free internet to schools. I'm not sure if that's been taken advantage of here, but so what we're saying is the cable companies will be able to assign any value to something as amorphous as the bandwidth that they give us on cable, and then they would deduct that, and so we could be essentially zeroed out. And this is across the country. This isn't just Vermont, this isn't just BCTV, this is nationwide. So this proposal has come out, and something that we are asking from you is to submit a comment through the FCC website, and I can assist with this, that supports BCTV's comments that we have placed and opposes this rulemaking change.
And are you asking that, you may say that in here, are you asking for us to do that as a municipality or
Yes,
as the
for the town
governing
funding to
body?
submit this letter.
Okay.
And there's a template there that I put in the original email.
Okay.
You might not have seen that, but I also have a sample of that. And this is with the instructions, so it's a sample letter here,
Okay.
and these are the instructions for submitting, but again,
You
you
want
can email it to me and I will submit it for you if you want.
Okay.
And that just basically says, we support BCTV's comments and
Do you have
we oppose
this
this
on?
rulemaking. If you don't have it, I'll just email it to you
That's
again.
what I'm wondering, just so we have an
Right.
electronic copy.
Yep, no, I emailed this whole package last week, and so
Okay.
that's, I will just follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's one action item, and I'm asking all of the towns to do that. And the deadline is next Friday, the 14th, by 11:59 p.m., or it doesn't count.
Sorry, say that one more time.
The deadline is Friday, next Friday,
A week from.
a week from,
December 14th.
yeah, December 14th, exactly. So the template just says, there's one paragraph that you can just, you can change.
Personalize.
I also have, personalize. I have the Town of Newfang's letter here if you want as a sample,
Sure.
what they said.
Yeah.
So that's something that we can do. We are working on all sorts of levels to try and do something about it. As you know, the FCC has a lot of power and, decided against net neutrality. So basically, this is an effort to deregulate cable companies even further. The reason that these franchise fees were established was in 1984. The Cable Act was passed, and that was in exchange for cables being able to come in and run their cables on the municipal rights-of-way. There was a public good that they needed to pay for. And this was the public good that many municipalities chose, and that's how it went across the country. So, of course, the public good is less valued these days, but that is where our funding has come from. So, the other thing that's going on, of course, is that cable revenues are declining because people are cutting the cord and just watching online. Again, all of our programming is online. You've got your Putney Selectboard online. It's not that we're not online, it's just that our funding comes from cable revenues. So as people cut the cord and move away from cable, that revenue declines. So that trend is already there. And for that reason, I'm also here to request that that the amount of $2,200 be put in the budget for the upcoming year, or that we request it, based on a rate of 85 cents per person in the town. We realize this is very late in the budget process. We realize this is the first time we're coming to you. I didn't plan this, of course, but we don't want our services to be eliminated without you knowing about what's going on and having the opportunity to do something about it. So I'm just welcoming your questions, your comments, your suggestions, and I understand this might require some kind of process, town meeting, sort of new to that, and just would take your advice on that.
Just on that last point, basically it would be up to us to decide whether to include it in the budget or not. And then could be a specific topic at town meeting. We could point out the fact that it's a new addition to the budget if we were to choose to go that way, and invite you to talk about it, or somebody to talk about it.
That's right.
And or invite questions, etc. So and then it's up to the voters. I mean, they can't specifically pull that unless you were to request this with a vote from the floor, like we've done with SEVEDs in the past. They could decrease the vote could be to decrease the budget by $2,200 if this was included in the budget and people didn't want it there, but they couldn't actually tell us to take the $2,200 out of your budget. So it comes out of the whole budget. It's a little, I don't know whether that makes sense. It's a little complicated.
I've watched enough
but
town meetings to know.
how that works. I would say that, as we continue our budget discussions, we'll look at that. And I mean, I'm definitely in favor of the idea of continuing BCTV. I think the meetings are, I get feedback from them regularly. I actually, honestly, have never watched one of ours like board meetings, so I don't know. But I think they're very important to people. I'm assuming you would be requesting that, Cor, even if this is not passed by the FCC, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, number one, the FCC is expected to pass it.
That's
And
right.
number two, yes, what I was trying to say is that at the same time, we have cable
Other
revenues
revenue,
declining.
Right.
And so, our budgets are shrinking anyway.
Regardless.
The FCC thing is more like going off a cliff, and this is more like
Slow squeeze.
a slow squeeze, right? What I'm trying to do is come up with a reasonable amount that I can promise you that we can deliver our services for at least another year with this support, knowing that it's new and, just have to put it out there.
Comments?
Well, I'm all for, finding a way
Having
to.
coverage, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, beyond that, it's just scary what really this signal is.
Yeah.
It's trying to eliminate local speech. you can say,
Right,
so.
right. We're gonna have fewer and fewer media companies just owning every airwave and none of them.
And not caring about that sort of. Yeah, the other thing, and this is partly just because it's sitting in front of me, but, I wonder whether it in any way fits into social service budgets. I mean, it's not a social service per se, but that's almost a slot
more
it
like
could
a public
occupy.
service.
Yeah,
Public service.
Yeah.
it doesn't really make sense for that, I guess,
Right.
but it sort of occurred to me.
I do think one of our strengths has been that we have kind of been that odd public service that wasn't, funded that way.
Because of social service.
Right,
Because of
right.
your involvement in the community. Yeah,
but-
no, that's why I was sort of crossing those wires.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So I have one question
Yes.
for someone outside of your area.
Yeah.
Do you charge a certain rate to televise a meeting?
We do charge rates what I have said in the past is for the towns that we're designated for, which is just 8 towns,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
For the cable subscriber revenues support the filming of the select board, the town meeting day is basic. And then over and above that, we either can find a volunteer or we have a charge to cover our costs. So we are doing that.
What is
Somebody
that
outside, well, we have a meeting rate of about $100. That's probably gonna go up a little bit. If somebody is outside of those towns, like they're in Marlborough, let's say,
Right.
which doesn't have cable, they can still be a member of BCTV, which is just a $20 a year membership. They can still make programming, they can put that on the channel, but we're not sending a camera to their select board.
right, right.
Yeah, so when you look at it from that perspective, I mean,
Right.
this is a
Yes, that's why I asked
very
the
much of a
question.
bargain.
It is, this subsidizes, you know,
Your costs,
Yes,
right, but
right.
not to the same tune of hiring you to do it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
no, I.
this is new
we will-
things letter, if you wanna just take a look
Thanks.
at that.
Yeah,
And we'll make sure to get that letter out. We're all comfortable with that, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah.
And you can,
Um,
again, you can just email it to me.
And then
I
you'll
will
take
submit
care of it.
And
Okay.
then you'll get an email confirmation.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Windham County Sheriff, Keith Clark.
He showed up.
He showed up. We had possibly hadn't worked out with Mark Anderson, so welcome, Keith.
Mark had to, he's covering the Vernon budget meeting tonight for me. Made more sense since I live north of here, Mark lives in Vernon. So, just want to follow up on your comments about President Bush. I first saw him when I was stationed at Pease Air Force Base in the 80s. He used to land there as vice president to travel to Kennebunkport. And I think for me, the part that was always amazing is right at the end, just how he always still took risks and was still lived life to literally the fullest. And I think,
Parachuting 4 years ago.
and some other things. And so it's just amazing. And I think that's how we all should live life, is that there's always, you can always enjoy it and do something. And I think, everybody would have understood if he just simply stayed home. But, it's just amazing. Some of the things he was doing in his 90s that I know people in their 20s won't do. I'm not jumping out of a perfectly clear.
Just to be clear.
So Karen gave me a call and asked me to stop in. I apologize. I think the first meeting I was away, that it was a possible opportunity. So I think the call came shortly after I sent the letter out about our rates. And it was a significant increase over, and not just for Putney, it's across all the towns. So we send that letter to all the towns. It really just comes down to that we have to cover all our costs, particularly where for the towns that have had that what we call the full-time coverage, 2,000 hours a year. We have a deputy. Much of that originally was based upon a federal grant. That federal grant limited what we could charge for. It had to be the direct hourly cost of the deputy. We couldn't charge for the car, we couldn't charge for the dispatching. It had to be just the deputy's hourly rate with some benefits, and even that it limited it. So as we over time, those costs have increased, but we never really took a look at what does it actually cost to put deputies on the road. And as I watched my checkbook in the office dwindle, I knew that somewhere along the line there were some costs that we weren't covering. Probably the two biggest ones were vehicles. That averages out to about $6,000 a year to cover a town. And the other cost is dispatching. The dispatching, we make up some of that by providing billable services to Bellows Falls. We provide dispatching for them, which helps offset a portion of, and the other is we provide dispatching services to Bennington County. Again, we bill them for that time. That offsets about half of my dispatching costs. We had the capability to do that. So that's one way that we've been able to keep our dispatching costs down. My dispatch is not funded by county dollars. It has to be based upon what we contract, those contracted hours. So those were probably the two biggest ones. And like any organization, our costs do go up. Health insurance. Thankfully this year our health insurance is not going up, but by a huge amount. But it did see I think since I've been the sheriff, I'm in my 12th year. I think it's almost doubled. Yeah, it's amazing. Again, there are some other overhead costs, and so what we did over this fall, late summer, early fall, was to say, what does it actually cost to put someone on the road? And then how do we given the number of hours, can we reduce those costs? Because there are some savings if you do enough hours, it's economy of scale.
Right.
And then when we did the numbers, I'm like, well, this is gonna be scary. But in fairness to all organizations, but particularly mine, that's the cost. To go with that, I want to do all I can do to keep our costs and keep them down. So we have brought in an organization called ESC, Empower Success Corps. I think I got it right this time. They will be reaching out to you as one of our clients, one of our stakeholders. They are an organization, it's a nonprofit out of Boston that has expertise in basically coming into nonprofits. Took some lengthy discussions on my part with them to convince them that I'm not a government entity.
Makes sense, yeah.
We're just a little different.
Yeah.
So they're coming in, they're looking at how to do things internally, externally, contracts, both, how we contract with the towns, and also how we spend our money when we have to contract to purchase things, particularly major items like cars. They're looking at, are there ways that we could save money? Are there markets that we haven't thought about where we could sell our services? They're looking at how we recruit, because I'm running short on staff. It's very hard in this current social environment to hire law enforcement officers. It's scary.
What is your average age of your deputies?
I could venture a guess, but I've never asked my deputies their ages.
Are they young, or are they like 20s,
They
30s?
tend to be younger than average. We just had a conversation day before yesterday with me, Mark Anderson, and Jess Fellows, with sort of the senior leadership, that we don't have what you would think of as legacy officers, where usually an policing organization, you have people that have been around for 30 plus years of law enforcement, and then you got the new rookie and everything in between. We tend to be more towards the less experienced side. A lot of life experience, but maybe less policing experience. So if I was to venture a guess, probably in the upper 20s, low 30s. I do have one deputy that's approaching retirement age. But other than that, I'm probably on the upper end, and I don't consider myself that old. But
We weren't going to say that.
but I'm getting older very rapidly. A friend of mine, his daughter turned 21 yesterday, and I'm, what? Wait, what? And she used to go over to the house and play with my daughters when they're little. I'm like, how did you turn 21? And I stopped. But so so again, the goal of having ESC to come in is saying, how do we reduce our costs if possible? How do we make sure that we're a healthy organization, not only just financially, but in all aspects? They're looking at our policies. They're looking, where are we at risk, and what potential opportunities are out there. So as I told Karen when I stopped in, those numbers are what we determined a couple of months ago. It is truly our hope by the time we actually reach the start of next year, that those costs we can get them even further down. Problem is, you have to budget.
Right.
We know that. And so one of the things that we didn't put in there, we actually did it with a couple other towns, is we said, if you do, as we put in that letter, if you do the 2,000, basically full-time, I think it's at 4062. If you did something around 1,500 hours, it wouldn't be at the 50. It would be, we can get in closer to 46. I think is the number that we developed. And that's something you may want to think about. Do you really have a need for 2,000 hours of policing services? You have a need for policing services, don't get me
Right.
wrong.
Does it justify the cost, though, I guess, would be
It's the question that
part of the question.
it is not up to me to tell.
Right.
I mean, I can tell you, I can give you some estimates and tell you some of the things where I think policing services do make this community safer. But it's what does the community want and what does it think its value is? And that's why you're on that side of the table, and I'm over here.
So Josh, you weren't here at the meeting and
Last
when
time,
we
right.
presented this,
Yeah.
and so the increase is about $11,300.
Yes.
Okay. And Sheriff Clark is right, because do we need 2,000 hours? I mean, we've been tracking the hours from the reports that we get every month, and they've been very helpful. And, you know, we're right around the 2,000 hours each month. So do we, and we've heard from the community as well. We have too much or we have too little.
Yeah.
So where's that happy medium? And we're gonna have to figure that out.
Well, that's also a balance, as far as that's concerned, that's also a balance of what we're using the officer for. 'Cause
Right.
The only time that I'm aware of that we get complaints is when people feel like they're getting too many tickets. I have said before, and I'll say it again, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for that for the most part, but that's what we hear complaints about, so.
Yeah, and, which is interesting. Putney is a little different than many of the towns that we patrol, because in many of the towns, they contract for that traffic enforcement. Putney has been very, wants that general policing approach. And what we find is we're getting more calls for service directly to my office. They're not 911 calls, they're more like, can you help me with this problem? Can you, and that's where I think the value is. We do a lot of proactive stuff. We work very well with social services, connecting people. And that, again, is that a value to you? Right now, Chris DeVito, one of my younger deputies this year, does a phenomenal job, and he's really starting to settle in and know the community. Does he write tickets now and then? Yeah, but he's also taking, you know, he's picking up the people that are driving intoxicated. We don't want any crashes, but he's not heavy on the tickets. I think it's a very good balance. And I think that's what this community has always looked for. I've never had a sense that Putney wanted heavy traffic enforcement, but it's never said don't do traffic enforcement either. I think it's finding that comfortable balance, and I think we're there on that aspect. But there are calls that come in. In fact, I know he's working on a call right now. It's more than just a quick, hey, here's some information. It's follow up, and I think people like it knowing that they know who that person is, or at least the same agency, same couple of people. The other thing is Putney and Westminster, it's been a very good working relationship with their hours and your hours. There are times when John's in Westminster, Chris is here, something happens there, he goes up there, and it goes back and forth. And when I look at it, it's about even. You know, the number of times they're coming here to help out. You know, I know at times, you know, Chris has been at training, and John's on Westminster, he's come down to cover stuff down here. So, but it goes, it's not one town is paying, you know, giving up more than the other. It's been a very good balance.
And I saw that in the reports. It's not like it's lopsided.
Right. No, if it, you know, at least that, I haven't seen it.
Right.
I have not.
I haven't either.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's
Yeah.
gotta be cyclical. There would be times when
Right.
one week it's more weighted that way and
Yeah.
one week here, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. but it's over the average. Usually even within a month, it sort of goes back and forth a little bit. But there's like it's pretty even. I bet now there's probably not 1 hour more in Putney from Westminster or the other way. I bet it's very, very close. So they're not patrolling us, but if that call comes in and they happen to be on,
Right.
we'll take that. And it's worked out well.
Yeah.
So.
I'm curious, and I don't ask this question in a way that would encourage more ticket writing, or less, but how much do the tickets offset the cost, generally speaking?
Because the tickets we have written haven't been huge tickets, you're probably 25% of your cost, maybe?
Yeah, it's
Maybe a little
hard.
lower right now.
There's a spreadsheet there, Laura,
Okay.
that kind of, from the reports that we've had over the last 3 years, and it, based on what we paid for, services and what the tickets, the fines, I'll say fines, but
But we don't collect all of that.
no, we do not.
We don't collect.
No.
Do you know roughly what portion we collect? It's not a lot, really.
No, it actually depends. The bigger the ticket, the more money the town gets.
Right.
We used to use an average of 60%, but what we're finding is that the tickets that we're writing tend to be a little lower. And I've asked why. I think what's happening is the deputies are giving roadside breaks. Hey, I stopped you for 15. That's a 3-point violation. I'll write you for 10 over, just so that we, it's clear that you made a mistake. It's a 2-point violation. The fine's lower. If the person in it is like, hey, I was wrong. I got a break, and the deputy feels like he did his or her job, and I'm okay with that. I leave it up to
Right.
them. But the downside is you're saying, we didn't get as much money back. You get some back. So
Yeah.
on that $10 or that 10-mile-an-hour ticket, you're probably getting somewhere around $30, $40 back. After they take, trust me, the state takes their percentage off the
Right.
top and surcharges. And if we wrote for the 15 over, you probably would see somewhere around 70. And if we were writing people for 20 over or more, you're probably getting somewhere between $120 back on average. So we've seen it across all towns that they're down a little bit, but I think that's why, is the deputies don't want to write these big tickets. Initially my thought was because they didn't want to go to traffic court, because it used to be in the sheriff's office, they didn't get paid to go to traffic court. I paid them to go to traffic court. So that doesn't make sense, because if they wrote the bigger tickets, it'd likely be contested and they would collect overtime to go to traffic court. So that didn't make it, once I started, that doesn't make sense either. So I think it's just they don't want to be the bad guy, but they want to do their jobs and do it
Right.
well. The idea is to keep people from speeding.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate
And
that.
it helps a lot with PR. I mean, I think, I hear about speeding tickets, but I usually hear people saying, yeah, it was fair, but I wish I hadn't gotten it, kind of thing, but-
And I don't want to frame that as a desired revenue. It's not.
No, but it does, the reason the system was set up is to help offset, but not to.
Exactly.
There are some communities in Vermont, as recently it's been published.
Yeah.
They pay for their entire policing.
Make serious money
tickets.
off those.
Yeah.
I don't want to be head of an organization that does that.
Yeah.
Good.
That's never been, I don't think that's the way to go.
And that's also been an ongoing conversation ever since we initially contracted, really through the COPS grant program, an ongoing discussion of whether we thought it was important to have significant revenue coming in through that. We've always sort of been on the same page as far as that.
Right.
The revenue's nice, but that's not why we're doing it, so.
And it's not gonna cover the
Yeah.
contractual services.
Right.
I mean, just from the reports, there's more warnings than there are citations. So they're present, that's what we
That's
want.
the-
That's what you want.
Yes.
So, and again, every town, it's a little different. Sometimes that's difficult for deputies that are moving around, because it's like, Dummerston wants this and Jamaica wants that. And Stratton just wants us, rattling doorknobs. I mean, that's not true, but
Yeah.
that's how we do. I gotta go to Marlboro, and meetings.
Right.
They want us over there when the college is in session, but when it's not. And, you know, they want tickets, but then they don't want it. And it's, so I think they're starting to figure out what is sort of that happy medium for all the communities, what works. But unless something has changed in the last year, Putney has not wanted that heavy. They want us out there. They want us to be seen, and we vary our schedules. We do days and nights and weekends. We do have some grant funds through Governor's Highway Safety. We do some extra patrols that's not built to your hours. So there, you're probably going to see a few more traffic stops and a few more tickets because that's part of the grant, looking for aggressive drivers and DUIs.
Right.
We try to do this around holiday time. You may have seen it around Thanksgiving. There was a lot of us out. But that's also the time when we need to do that. We need to put that presence, keep people slowed down, and
Right.
make sure that they're getting home safely.
And just because I'm really new to this, what's your approach to community policing?
Community policing it sounds like a very simple concept. It's not that simple.
No, I'm sure.
So community policing for me is what's the community's problems and needs. So law enforcement is one aspect of policing, and I'm not a huge fan of people that say they're law enforcement officers, because law enforcement on any given day is probably less than 10, probably closer to 5% of what we do. The rest is policing. And policing just means you're taking care of something. In the military, we used to call policing the grounds, which means you'd go around and you'd be picking up garbage. That's what policing was. Police the grounds. The general's coming to us. No, I'm going to be out there painting rocks. Don't laugh, we painted rocks. So to me, community policing is, and I've always encouraged it, is tell me what the problem is, what your needs are, and let us help you find the solutions to those. It's not always enforcing the law. Sometimes it is. But we just see if we give a lot of warnings. See if that slows people down. It may be us saying, you know, you got a section of road where we know, based on your town ordinance, the speed limit is 35, but you don't have any signs up. And we're seeing people doing 55, 60 miles an hour. Let's work with the highway department, make sure we get the right signs up, and then so then people, it's very visible. Those radar cards that we put out, that's a way of saying to the community, you're important to us, slow down a little bit. And you know, if you pay attention to this flashing sign over here, you're not going to get a ticket. It's really just what is the community's needs and problems, and how can we help? And a lot of times people are afraid to call us because they think that the only thing we're going to do is make arrests, and that's not always the answer. It often is not the answer. It's sitting everyone and saying, what's really going on? Is it a socioeconomic issue? Is it a change in demographics that people suddenly aren't comfortable with? They don't even know how to begin that conversation. Is it that there has been an influx of drug, but people think it's drug activity? Has there been deaths from opioids? There have been, even in this community.
Yeah.
And now you start that conversation, and where do you begin? And that's what to me is community policing is using us as police officers to be value added, and not the bad guys with the guns. And that's
Right.
so that's my 4-minute.
How is the sheriff's office starting those conversations in communities?
The same way we're doing it tonight. So, what can we bring? I mean, we've had at times we see that there's an issue, and we've been very proactive. Particularly in the towns where we're there 40+ hours a week. The Vernon, Putney, Westminster. Jamaica is about 20-25 hours a week, so they're, again, same conversations. We're not the answer to all the problems in the world. But one of the places where I think we're making a huge strides is in our schools. That you don't necessarily need an SRO. In the larger schools, it's helpful because the kids have a chance to talk to us. If you were to go on the news today, social media today, bad cops, kind of thing. But when they have a chance to really talk to an officer out on the street, and they get to see each other as human beings, that's where we start to make headway because they see us as a resource that they can talk to. I've stopped in at like Leland and Gray High School and just gone to the cafeteria and had lunch with the kids. And initially like, why are you here? I'm like, because I heard you had you know, and they turn out to be great conversations. And it's amazing what these kids, you know, are thinking about and talking about. And, you know, sometimes questions are about us. Why did you want to become a cop?
Right.
You know, and they're, you know, well, I had a mentor that was in law enforcement when I was a kid, and so that's, oh, really? And, well, what do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? And then next thing I was like, can I talk to you privately? That's okay. Yeah, you certainly can. So that's, you know, and I know here, Chris goes into the school. Somebody like, well, we don't want cops in the school. The kids love it.
Right.
You know, to see someone up close that actually will smile and talk to them versus maybe what they're just seeing on television.
I think it's lovely to have police officers visiting the school. My concern is in having to have them there all the time, guarding the school. That would bother me.
It bothers me. I grew up in a very small community where the school was almost the community center. It was a place you could go, and you know you didn't have to have a top secret background clearance done before you could go in. You could volunteer. You could check to help people out. That's what I grew up with, and now it's easier for me to get into Springfield Prison and out of Springfield Prison than it is to go to Brattleboro High School. And that's true nationwide. We lock down our schools. We make the people that are paying for that school not welcome there, and the students feel like they're locked. They have to be locked in.
Right.
And because of things that have happened, and I think we may have gone too far. You know, instead of saying, we're worried about the bad guy coming in. Why don't we talk about how we start conversations with teenagers, because soon they're going to be the adults, and how we can make their communities safer. So when people need mental health services, it's okay. That's why I've been very public about what I went through, because I want people to know it's okay to get help. But our schools should not be locked down like a prison. Is there a place for a school resource officer, properly trained officer who really understands that education component and mentoring and problem solving with the kids, and not, we had a situation recently, and to me it was very telling of the benefit of an SRO. Jess Fellows was actually covering Brattleboro High School, and one of the students basically was like, hey, we're worried. We think so-and-so may be carrying a knife. Okay. So I wish I had it here to show you. So she thought he may have like a small pocket knife. And she's talking, do you have a knife? And he pulled his chain up, and he had this rather large, scary look. Why are you carrying? Because I'm afraid. Well, that's it. So instead of being able to talk to someone, and he wanted to protect himself, he brought a very, very dangerous weapon to school. So how do you balance keeping him safe or feeling safe and keeping other students safe? So there are some people that will go to school carrying weapons, and so you have to look at the school, you have to look at the school environment, but I think that's a conversation that needs to be more broad, and we really need to start saying, why are our schools a target versus let's lock them down and make it this. I just went way too long. It's you. Yeah,
She asked.
Yeah, I asked.
I am basing this on the assumption that I'll get a somewhat biased opinion from you, but would it be a significant mistake for us to shift from our 2,000 hours of coverage?
No. It's probably not the answer you thought here. I actually think Putney should look at least for this year, to see how it goes, somewhere around 1,500 to 1,600 hours. You'll have about 32 hours a week coverage if you were to do 1,500 hours.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've done this year is we've been able to increase our governor's highway safety grants. In fact, we have a 20-hour position just to coordinate. So we believe that we're going to be able to put deputies on the road to more highway. So again, you're getting the presence, you're getting the traffic and stuff. Let us, if you did the 1,500 hours, it would give us a chance to see whether or not the community really notices that big difference. It wouldn't be such a huge reduction that it would be a really drastic change.
Yeah.
But I think that may be a question to ask the general public if that's something. If you did that, your cost would be probably a little lower than what you're paying this year.
Yeah.
My cost would, it frees up a few hours a week for my deputy, so it's less worry about overtime kind of thing.
Right.
Um,
What would the rate be at? At the 40.65 or?
No, it would be around 46. We actually did it for a couple of other towns. We figured
Okay.
out that rate. So if you,
It might
I can
change
get back to you.
anyway. It might change anyway.
It might change
Right.
again, but the rate I gave you is not going to go up.
That one's
Okay.
gonna happen.
Yeah,
Right.
but if you came back to me and said, we really think that 1,500 hours will work, I can do a rate that's probably somewhere in between those two that I gave you.
Okay,
And we're already
that's
in that
fair,
discussion.
that's fair.
We've already told a couple other towns we would do the same
Okay,
thing.
And we'd be able to retain having one consistent
Yeah,
deputy and.
but that's
For the most part.
our goal for the most part. It's tough, people go on vacations, there's
Mhm.
training. And we actually think it may actually help with retention. Because the deputy doesn't feel like they're stuck in one fishbowl. They get to get out for those other 8 hours. They can do some other things. They can help us do extra additions. It may not sound like much, but
It's
I have some
different.
deputies that like the fact that they get to fly to some other, it's often not a vacation spot, to bring somebody back. It's a
Yeah.
couple of days away from me, and they get to do something different. So it gives us some flexibility that sort of that
Right.
40 hours doesn't do. And it would give us a chance for a year to see if it would make a significant difference one way or the other. I would be a little leery going much less than 1,500 hours. I really
Okay.
would at this point. We're pretty busy in this community.
I guess I would suggest, you talk about some of the other things that the deputies will do in town, social services, wherever the schools, but I think the general public just don't know about that. And their perception is that we're paying $70,000, $80,000 a year for people to get stopped. And the people I've spoken with or who've spoken with me about it, they're saying, I can't, our taxes are going up, I can't pay my taxes anymore, and what we're paying for is traffic stops. And I've had a few pretty irate people talk to me about that, because they really wanted to hear about this budget tonight. And, but I think they need to know. If we're talking about community policing and building that rapport with the community, they have to know what goes on. And they're not getting that.
And we try.
Yeah.
We do the press releases, we have a Facebook page, some of the things that we help with, it's sometimes hard to say to the public because it's very easy to identify the individual, and there's certain things of privacy where we help them with very personal, because it is easy to call us. Sometimes it's, they don't even know who to call, or the services just don't exist initially. So you're right. And I've heard it too. The only time I see you is when you're stopping a car. Well, how often do you see that? Well, maybe once a week. Well, so it's not every day, 8 hours. So where do you think they are? Those other, they're interacting with the kids in school. They're you may see them at the Putney Diner, like, well, but watch who they're talking to and knowing their community. But they are working on some other very serious offenses in this community. Again, everything from domestic violence cases to the DUIs to the drug cases, and working with our other policing partners. We have after many years, a great working relationship with the state police. We have a great working relationship with other departments around us to make sure that we're sharing information. that has taken a while. So again, that's all part of what you're paying for, is us to be able to do that. So I've heard it also. You know, someone gets that ticket, you know, if I had a ticket for $180, I probably wouldn't be happy either. I would think that's the only time they see policing. So yeah, we certainly can try to take some new approaches. I'm not exactly sure what those are. Maybe it's using cable television.
Yeah.
Maybe checking in with us quarterly in one of these meetings, or
We can certainly ask,
semi-annually, or-
we can certainly ask our local, we don't do that.
I don't mean
that
you
often, but
personally,
yeah,
but your deputies.
Yeah.
No, and I think
He comes in.
he does come in, but it would be good for him to come in.
Yes.
If you haven't met him, he's,
No, he's been in.
No, he's
Yeah.
been,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking on camera, it might
Yeah.
give
That's
you a
it.
little bit of that exposure that.
Town meeting,
Would
he'll
help.
be there.
be there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
We need to stagger town meetings.
Yeah.
I know.
They're all at the same time, same day.
Yeah.
I think Mike can relate.
I know they have met with somebody in your office, I don't know whether it was you or not, but animal control? You got any sort of a
We've
comment on
started
that?
some conversations again. As you know, we've tried before.
Yeah,
It's difficult to say I can do it for one town because there are expenses that go with just getting started. We tried a few years ago, I think you may have been on the board.
Yeah.
You know, here's a model policy we ask all the towns to use so that it's
Right.
consistent and, you know, that we can use. We would have bought the van, bought the equipment. And then what we ran into is, you know, towns, yeah, when we call, we want you to come right away.
Right.
The animal control person may be, you know, in Dummerston, it's gonna take a little while to get to Rockingham, or her to get to Rockingham. And then well, we don't want if you can't be here right away, and I thought that a little odd, because right now, most of those towns don't have anybody.
Right,
So if no one's showing up, how is that worse than someone getting there
Yeah.
2 hours later?
yeah.
So we are willing to have those conversations again. It's, from what I'm gathering, again, not just here in Putney, it is frustrating everywhere. No one wants to do it anymore, and yet there seems to be an increased need for it. And it's often it's difficult to deal with someone and their pets as it is to deal with
Right.
someone and their children. It really is. So that it does take a person that understands that dynamic when they're an animal control officer.
Do you have any idea of the cost? You haven't got that far.
Haven't gotten that far. I want to say when we looked at it before, when we broke it down, we figured our startup cost for, you know, the hourly rate, the van that we actually looked, we found a used one, so we thought that would at least get us started. Was somewhere, and again, this was 7 years ago, I think it was
Right.
somewhere around $60,000, so add probably 20% to that. And then depending on how many towns,
Right, you divide it.
yeah, so, and again, part of the problem was that model policy, is so that it was consistent, it would be easier for someone to enforce. You know, some towns wanted a leash law, some towns didn't, some towns only wanted us to deal with dogs, and
Right.
others want us to deal with everything from aardvarks to zebras.
Yeah.
So, pretty good, huh?
You're the beaver you want in our town.
And you know, we dealt with llamas and ostriches and emus here in Putney. So,
reindeer occasionally maybe.
yeah, they're all doing very well over in Bennington, as I understand it.
Good.
So, but no, that is something that Mark somewhere is probably cringing right now as I say this, that we certainly are willing to entertain again.
There's obviously
A need,
There is.
yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I've certainly said it before, much as I hate, or don't hate to say it, but, you know, you guys seem like the obvious ones to provide that service on a county-wide-ish basis,
Yeah, and
you
we do
know?
offer, even just under your current, we do some animal
Right.
stuff. We
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
pick up this, my deputies don't like doing it, and I don't necessarily like muddy, nasty
Right.
dogs in my cars, but they will take them over to the Humane Society, and we have a good working relationship with the Humane Society. But it doesn't necessarily meet, the dealing with the unlicensed dog issues, but there are other towns where we do that in. After that period of time has passed, we've hand-delivered letters to folks saying, look, your dogs are unlicensed. And that usually gets the compliance,
Right.
Yeah, that's
If I could
a big
interject.
issue for us is enforcement is
Yeah.
Yes.
virtually impossible
Right.
from our perspective.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll be going to Westminster at their request to talk about this issue, and it's you're well aware of what's happening there, so we'll probably get people talking to each other, but it's a big concern.
Yeah.
It is, and it's just, part of my concern is the enforcement of the tickets that we write.
Right.
So when we write the.
What does it cost to enforce?
So we
Yeah.
enforce it, and then there's really no enforcement mechanism behind that ticket. So the ticket is issued, some pay the fine, some do not.
That's what we're gonna look at.
That makes it very, very difficult because there's no, in some parts of it, there's no real teeth to it.
Right.
And, the ordinances are there. That was one of the things that happened in Vermont when we switched to the civil violations. We used to send people to municipal court. And that was different because it was, so, I'm glad to hear that our legislators are aware.
I did have a question about that. I'm thinking as a road trooper, it's the enforcement of those leash laws would be really difficult when I think about it, because what it would come down to is one person's word against another, unless you have photographic video evidence of somebody not walking their dog on a leash. So that's one of the difficulties, from the legislative standpoint. That's something I also want to look into more so, because we have, as Mike knows, we've gotten phone calls from folks about issues with aggressive dogs, and it is a complicated issue.
Yeah, no question. And it leads me to my last question for you, which is, should we be muscling our representatives in both the House and the Senate to be doing more for you on the level of sheriff work, on the level of animal control, on the level of police services funding?
I don't know if Mike has checked his Facebook Messenger recently.
Yeah.
I reached out to him so we could have a conversation. I don't know if I'd use the word muscle, though.
Try.
I think that now is a good time to start having conversations how sheriffs are funded, so that maybe these, looking at maybe a different funding mechanism, and also look at some of these other issues in regard to what we're able to support the towns to do. The animal issues come all the time. You had the situation here last summer, 2 summers ago. One dog attacked another dog, and there's no violation there that we could find. You had.
And statutorily, that
Was
an issue.
Right.
And those, and maybe now is the time to say,
Right.
because it's more than one community. If it's one community,
Right.
Is that the legislatures focus? But I think it's across the state. These conversations need to occur. But I did reach out to Mike. I have not yet reached out to Hashim, but I certainly will. I've spoken to some other legislators, but any input from select boards does make a difference to say, look.
That's
here's-
why I
Yeah.
was asking.
Yeah,
Do what we can.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Feel free to have any one of you or Karen reach out to me if you want additional information or data. I know our STARS reports work because Karen's getting them.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely helpful, no question. No, and I think, we have not made this happen, but I think just having a presence more often, both from a PR standpoint and just so we're better informed is probably not a bad idea. So.
I certainly, and Chris,
Well, he was gonna come tonight, but then
He was.
He knew you were coming, so I told him to wait till January.
okay. Well, Okay, I'm glad he is doing that. So,
Yeah.
Good.
and again, feel free to reach out anytime.
We will.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me know.
All right. Distracted for a moment, so I'll wait. But we're going to move on to State Representative Michael Mrowcki and Representative-elect Nader Hashim.
Just as well sit here.
Wherever you're from.
Yeah.
Yes.
Put you guys together.
So before we start on the legislative piece, there's a piece I'd like to ask you, the select board about. Within the town, we have our Affordable Housing Committee, and there's been some talk about us meeting and having some conversations, but several of our elder members are probably not going to be able to continue. We would like some guidance as to whether we should stick with the configuration we have or try and beat the bushes for some people who'd like to join and then bring them to the select board. So I certainly need an answer now, but if you'd like to consider that in the future, and when we do meet, Pip and I have just started to have a conversation, and we'd like to figure out, since it is a committee appointed by the select board, what your pleasure would be in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably remember, although I don't know whether you were particularly active at that time, but we had a couple new younger people come onto that committee not too long ago, and I think part of what happened was them seeing the fact that there were several who were ready to be moving out. I think they both felt suddenly like they were potentially going to be holding the reins for the whole thing. So I think we need to work on sort of that aspect of it as far as how to recruit people, that we need to, you know, in many ways almost start a new committee insteed of trying to hand the reins to somebody and say, this is what we've been doing and now it's yours. Say, where do we start from here? Because I mean, we have,
What do you look at?
as you're obviously aware of, you know, 2 affordable housing projects in town that we didn't have before, and that's great. And we need, unfortunately, or I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, we need a whole lot more. Unfortunately, because it's hard work. Fortunately, because it's a great place for people to live. So I think how to involve a wider net is a question. Definitely.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with that, and I'm going to talk with Pip next week, and then we'll get back to you and keep it going.
I think, you know, from, on that topic, as far as you guys are concerned in your role, the other question is, you know, funding for those things. And obviously, you know, Governor Scott with the housing revenue bond shifted things pretty dramatically over the last 2 years and into next year, but that ends in a year. And there's already, you know, a reasonable mechanism for at least some funding for affordable housing within the state, but federal is shifting, certainly.
That's something to look at, but certainly with VHCB, we want to keep that going. And then I think Governor Scott really does support this.
Absolutely.
Governor Douglas
Did not.
tried to do away with it every chance he had, but I think Governor Scott really does see how housing affects so many pieces that
The value for the state. I
Yeah,
think.
you bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So segueing into that, though, I want to start to introduce my new partner here.
Thank you.
Excited to get going. We just came back flew back from DC, and boy, are our arms tired.
Yeah.
But starting that process of meeting with other legislators from around the country, around the state.
Yeah, we just had the freshman orientation for all the new legislators, and it was the largest freshman class going into the state legislature since 1965. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of legislators that are younger than me. And we were around a table, and there was some legislators who were, you know, early 20s, And I told them I was 30, and they told me, oh yeah, you're still considered young. I was like, yeah, I am. I am. And so, but my point is that there's a whole lot of enthusiasm and there's a lot of energy. And with the new veto-proof majority that we have, I feel like there's a lot of work that's going to be getting done. And so, I just want to hear from folks, what you feel the priorities may be, and what I can take with me to share with the other newer legislators when we meet up next.
Yeah. And then right here on the ground level, just to go back to what Keith said, we've heard from Westminster, who's having, it seems like, some serious problems with dog control, with enforcement, having the regs there, but really no teeth in them. And they're looking to us. We'll be meeting with them next week, and it's probably a conversation that should carry over to here and a lot of other towns, because I don't think it's isolated. We've had our situations here.
And you may or may not be aware that our animal control board, that's not what they're called, Animal Advisory Board, has been very active and has been reaching out to Sheriff Clark as well as others to try and figure out how we can manage that better right in Putney. So, including them in that conversation. I don't know that whether they're aware of the discussion in Westminster. Some of them may well be, but
I think Janet Goldstein is.
might be worth letting
Yes.
them.
I think, well, I know they were looking to partner with other communities or
Yes.
open the
Yes,
discussions
definitely.
towards partnership,
Yeah.
so.
Been a lot going on in Westminster because it's been such a hot issue. And certainly there's those 50,000 feet issues that encompass a lot, but for people right at the ground level, sometimes something like this, there's nothing more important where they're having struggles. So we'll keep you updated to that, and if there's feedback that you want us to bring back, certainly we want to hear, and that's one of the reasons we're here today, to hear what's important for you. We certainly have some ideas on the work we want to continue from last year, the work that we hope to build on and start this year. But we'd love to hear what's important to you, what you think we should be looking at as well.
What are you looking at? You're all looking at me.
I'll keep talking. Keep talking. So.
John, I asked that, gentlemen, do you know which committees you'll be sitting on? Has that been
Don't know yet. We've submitted our preferences, and the Speaker of the House, I think, determines on day 1, so January 9th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The word starts to get out before then, but that's when it's official.
May I ask what your preferences would be?
For me, number 1 was judiciary, number 2 was transportation, and then commerce.
And you start with just one? Is that how that works? Or you
There's 150 House members, so that's why we only have one. There's 30 senators, so that's why they sit on 2 committees each. And then there are other committees, but they're not standing committees. For example, I've been part of for the last few years, the group that's been rewriting the regs on harassment prevention. The Me Too movement has certainly crossed the threshold of the State House, just like everywhere else. We want to make sure it's a physically and emotionally safe atmosphere. So that's another committee that I've been working on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already broached the subject of policing. I think that that's based on even looking at what Senator White proposed last year or the year before. It's obviously a statewide issue, the last thing we want, which I know, I don't know enough about the legislation that was proposed, but the last thing we want is an unfunded mandate. Yeah. But I do think that it's a statewide issue that how it could be funded and what that means for different communities, because I certainly know at our level it's hard to fund these things. These are big numbers, and we're a reasonably sized town with certainly our share of numbers, but we're not, our share of issues, but we're not one of the, I don't think of us as one of the sort of more plagued towns in the state, and a lot of towns have huge issues that they're trying to manage, so that's complicated, definitely. You obviously have background related to that stuff. And understand that.
Right alongside that, in regards to policing, I'm going to pass it over to here because the idea of what's fair and impartial policing has really become important.
Yes.
The idea of how racism rears its head in Vermont, sometimes not so obviously, but with a prevalence that we need to take a look at it. And to that end, on the 16th, Nader and I will be hosting a community forum at the library. And I'm going to pass it over to you,
Sure.
Nader.
So Lieutenant Scott is the chair of the Fair and Impartial Policing Committee. And, well, just to backtrack a bit, implicit bias is something that we all have to different degrees, and it's not just regarding race. You have implicit bias when it comes to somebody. If you see somebody dressed in rags, you make an assumption about them. If somebody tells you they come from a rich neighborhood, you make an assumption about them. We all have those biases in our head that come from decades, if not centuries, of media and enculturation, and it's something that I think will also take decades to dismantle. But you have to start somewhere. And so coming back to what we're doing on the 16th, Lieutenant Scott, as the chair of the Fair and Impartial Policing Committee, is coming down to basically give his talk that he gives regarding the policy that troopers are supposed to follow when it comes to fair and impartial policing. And there is a model policy that has been created that has to be adapted by all police agencies. And if they modify anything in it, then it has to be sent back for review and then sent back for approval. So that's, and the conversation on the 16th, after he delivers his talk, it's going to turn into a more organic conversation about race in general. And then we're going to figure out, what the next steps are in continuing this conversation.
Sure. And I know that was, I believe that was part of your platform.
It is.
And I commend you on
Thank you.
your taking that on in the way that you are. That's
I
important.
appreciate it.
No
At
question.
the conference we were just at down in DC, there was a panel regarding race in the United States, and there was a panelist who said that race is at the center of everything in this country, and it's not always overt in the way racism or implicit bias is implemented. There's unfair lending practices. You see it in the health insurance sector. You see it in education, but it's not always looking at you right in the face. So that's just something to consider.
No, it's a very complicated problem here because we're not looking it in the face most of the time. We have tons of socioeconomic stratification, but not a lot of ethnic and cultural diversity, and that's a complicated thing. When you're not seeing it, feeling it, how do you allow people to talk about it in meaningful ways? And that's not easy. So.
It's a uncomfortable topic to talk about, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. That was another thing we talked about, is that when you speak to white people, it's an uncomfortable topic to bring up. And just to reiterate, it's okay to be uncomfortable when talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's just reflective of the changing landscape across the country and in Vermont too. Our
Absolutely.
minority population is small, but our school populations are showing what's happening, and I think we're around 15% statewide now.
No, which is
people of
great.
color.
I have
Yeah.
to say, it's one. I think it's one of the. For me, raising kids here, it's been one of the sort of biggest questions in my mind. Of, how do we manage this with our kids when we're in a place where there isn't that kind of diversity, and that's hard. So I think it's great. We see more people of color in this area than we have. It's still a teeny number in real terms, but it's encouraging to see at least a shift occurring, and that's good.
This is a great opportunity for us to be proactive about this and not have to be reactive. And part of this is inspired by a former colleague of us who resigned from the legislature because of the
Yes, yeah, think about it.
the racial experience she had of hate and being targeted. So, moving ahead, though, we'll be looking. Everything emanates from the budget, and some of the murmurings here and across the country are that the economy has sort of been zipping around, except the middle class really still hasn't felt it, and that's part of what showed in the last election. And now a lot of murmurings are that the signs of a correction in the economy may be rising up. So hopefully we can mitigate that and keep us on track. But Vermont, as a small state, has to really encounter the winds that come from other places. So we're certainly going to be watching that closely. As we move forward, though, too, the challenge will be balancing what we think are important ideas that need investment. To this day, we're still talking about full coverage for cell phones across the state and finishing that last mile for high-speed internet. And I think right across the political spectrum, everybody agrees we need to do that. We have a price tag on it now that would probably be about $300 million. And I think we need to make that investment. And it's something I think we really need to convince the governor that this is going to be worthwhile, because he's already laid down the gauntlet that, you know, no new taxes, level funding for everything. But these are the kind of investments that are not going to happen unless we put the money on the table ourselves too. And I think going back to those barriers for business, for bringing people to the state, this is one of those that is going to be vital. So
I was going to say, that's something that we see at the school. There's a lot of new families,
yeah,
many of whom are techies,
yeah,
and they say that's
A limiting factor for them.
yeah, one of the biggest reasons they don't want to move here is because they can't work
Yeah.
from home. And, you know, you have things like Act 46 to try to, well, part of it to try to save money, because school size is diminishing, yet you're not building the infrastructure to bring more families in. So, you know, it's an investment in the future.
This also goes back to the conversation about affordable housing that we were having earlier,
Absolutely.
because
Yep.
that's really number one. You know, if you don't have a place where you can go to sleep and put your stuff, you're not going to be able to start working from home. You're not going to be able to go looking for a job or, you know, care for your kids. So affordable housing is definitely up there. And not to completely change the subject, but I also know that one of the other priorities that we're looking at is reproductive rights and health. You know, with the confirmation of Kavanaugh, I know that our leadership is really looking at codifying Roe v. Wade statutorily here in Vermont. So I think that's high up there on the list.
yeah. The concern is that there's going to be a Supreme Court challenge sooner rather than later, and if we don't have it in statute, which we don't. I mean, after the 1972 decision, things just worked fine because we didn't think. Yeah. So as Nader pointed out, it's going to be a priority for us to take care of that.
Last week, we heard from, switching gears totally on you guys, sorry. We heard from our Conservation Committee about the emerald ash borer coming to Vermont. It's actually been identified here, in, what was it, 4 communities? And it is predicted to deeply affect our communities within the coming years. Brings me to environmental issues on all levels. I would really like to see our state funding and preparing for and helping us adapt to the changing climate and the needs our towns are going to have around that. We are, from what I understand, our Conservation Committee is now cataloging all of the ash trees that are along the roads, and we may have huge concerns with trees falling down. So that's where my mind is going.
Sure. And you're right, this is a concern that stretches across health, what the state looks like. And there's a large climate caucus, a group of legislators that want to focus on this, and we'll be probably growing this year too, to look at how it changes things in ways we haven't thought of. and preparing for that, and doing what we can here too. The low-hanging fruit in Vermont, because the largest piece of our carbon footprint is our vehicle use, is how do we make transportation more of a group thing rather than all of us individually driving in our cars. Maybe carpooling is the easiest way, but we need to look at what other places are doing, and this is a place we need to look at as well. But it's
especially with all the threats to the EPA as
Yeah.
they have been, and as you were talking about with
Yeah.
reproductive rights, environmental protection on a state level
Yeah.
is more important than it's ever been. There's no question about
I
it.
had the opportunity to attend that, the caucus, the Climate Solutions Caucus, and, we are supposed to be reducing our carbon footprint by 2050. And unfortunately, we're going the opposite direction on that. And, I was talking with the Democratic leadership about where we stand on where climate change stands on the priority list. And while it is up there, the issue is that, we need to hear about specifics and specifically what we need to change as a state so that carbon pollution can go down and we can continue to address the problem. Because we all want to see climate change, we all want to see a recovery from that. But the question is, what specifically are we going to attend to? And, as Mike said, vehicle pollution is one of the issues.
Pollution, the other big one for us is home heating. That's huge, and electricity use, and those are all things. And actually, I don't truly know how this breaks down between state and federal, but I noticed, for example, recently that the Efficiency Vermont rebate on LED bulbs has decreased, so now they're more expensive than they used to be, and that's really unfortunate. LEDs are definitely the way, and that's percentage-wise, that's a relatively small number, but just electricity use, but also as far as legislatively encouragement of transportation through electric vehicles also, whether that means more infrastructure investment in electric vehicle hubs or otherwise. Also, anything that's state-driven as far as like school bus use, et cetera. I know that there are communities that are investing in electric school buses, and they're tremendously expensive still, unfortunately, but we need to be thinking that way very clearly. I totally agree with what
And
you're
while I
saying.
agree with everything you're saying, and that was a part of my point, my other point is that we also have to adapt to the
Preparedness,
changes
absolutely.
and be
Yeah.
prepared for the
Yeah, yeah.
changes that are inevitably coming, that
Yeah.
we can't reverse course on that right now. So how do we prepare for flooding? How do we prepare for ash borers? How do we
Yeah.
prepare for all of these things that are coming?
I think we're going to see a population increase, 10, 15 years down the road
In the state.
in this state,
I
because
agree.
I think, the
Climate
unfortunate
refugees.
reality is
Yeah.
we're not gonna, make a sudden U-turn and change everything overnight, and people are going to start leaving the cities that are going to start getting more and more damaged over time, and we'll see folks migrating to points north.
And that actually circles back to the affordable housing
Yes.
issue too. On the VHCP, we've been discussing that topic, exactly that, climate refugees, as well as, just the economic stratification that can cause us, tax-based issues, et cetera, because the first migration of that, and, sometimes this feels like it's all paranoia and fantasy, but I don't think it is. The first flux of that would certainly be those who can afford to, followed by those who can't afford to but can't stay where they are. And how to be at all prepared for that is a complicated issue, definitely.
And as the recent report pointed out for our region, that as that's happening at the same time, industries that we're used to having, that we've had all along, are going to start disappearing because the climate no longer supports them.
Skiing will see a big hit in some way or another. Yeah, I
Maple
don't
syrup
exactly.
might.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the other pressure we're going to get as far as that's concerned, I would have to assume, is on our agricultural sector overall. As certain areas are less able to produce the volume of food that they have, there's going to be an increased need to produce food more
Well,
locally,
just
et cetera.
almost 40 years I've been here, when I first moved to Vermont, you could almost guarantee you were gonna get a frost between the 15th and 30th of September.
Yeah.
And that's moved up a month,
Yeah.
just in this time. So it is changing things. And we hosted a meeting last year up at Westminster Farms because there was concerns that the new required agricultural practices to help groundwater weren't being looked at in a way that was reflective of the climate being different down here. And to his credit, we got Secretary Tebbets down here, and he said, you know, you're right. And I think we have the flexibility to offer some waivers here. And I know Westminster got a waiver on what they were going to do. And it reflects the reality that it just, right here in Vermont, it has changed again. So.
No, and a lot of that agriculture, as far as Secretary Tebbets is concerned, so much of it is focused up north
Yep.
because that's where the big farms are.
Yep.
And we are less agricultural as far as acreage is concerned, but when it comes to population base, et cetera, and we're losing that. And we don't want to keep losing that because that's going to come back. It's more important again, you know, so, yeah, complicated stuff. But have at it.
Well, I hope you also know that we can come here whenever you want. You can get in touch with us. You know, sometimes things come up that nobody has thought up yet. That are going to be a problem. You know, when Peter Shumlin was governor in that first year, who knew that we had major floods in the north, major floods in the south, and that was pretty much what his first 2 years were. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we never thought we were going to have that level of destruction. So we dealt with that. And so whatever comes up, if we're missing something, please let us know.
The other thing I would just, based on your initial comment, and I don't want to criticize that at all, but you said, you know, now that we have a veto-proof majority, I would just encourage you to be as inclusive and nonpartisan as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I know you think that, I know you think that way, but you know, even in the language saying it's a veto-proof majority, we can move things. It's like, you know, try and work together, and I know you do. But that's important.
It's a good reminder, and it has to be intentional. I volunteer with a national group called the National Institute for Civil Discourse. And the reason I did is that when they came here to Vermont to talk with us, I said, well, things are pretty good here. And Ted Celeste, who's the head of it, said, you're in the majority, right?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, the majority usually thinks that.
Yeah.
So it was a good reminder.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You're right. We need
It's
to.
just important to
You bet.
try and be open-minded. And again, I know you guys both are, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for having.
Thank you for your work. And, you know, this is the best place in the world I could ever think of. And I know it doesn't just happen. You guys put all the time in. And I have to say, we've got a good one here. And I hope,
Thank you.
yeah.
And good help to help.
Yeah, and you
Yes.
bet. We got a great staff. And
Oh, actually, and what, you weren't here for this, but the core
yeah.
started out with concerns
I
about
was there last
funding.
week,
So, yeah,
right.
no, that's one more topic that is certainly important at the state level, is that, especially if the FCC is gonna shift things, that
I was reading about that earlier.
communication is,
earlier
yeah,
today.
it's important. So, good,
Perfect time. I have
thanks.
to go pick up my daughter from basketball.
There you go,
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, boy, we're really flying along now. You guys weren't in a hurry, were you? So, yes. Yeah, so you must be.
Do you guys have copies of my budget?
Yes,
The library budget? Okay, great.
and we received them.
Anything else?
Yes.
I love that you chose the state colors.
Oh.
Was that purposeful?
Why, yes, no, it wasn't. No, I just find, now that we have the color printer, it's like, why not make things a little bit easier to read? Oh, are yours front and back? That might be a little, if you got, I also
No,
make copies.
2 seconds. You have, oh, it is fine. Front and
Oh,
back.
one of the people.
Yeah, if you guys want other copies, I have other copies that are just on one side.
Do you wanna?
Should I begin
Oh,
narrating?
okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, sure.
As you guys can see, so the top is our revenues. I'm sure you guys are very used to looking at the balance sheet and the budget, so I might not have to narrate this as much as I do for other folks. But as you can see, our town allocation request has gone up 13.07%, and an overall increase of 10.17%, and that is mostly due to benefits costs going up because I am adding my partner to the health insurance, which increases it by a third because we're a very small shop. And I'll go through line by line for the other increases. If you guys want to go down to expenditures, our cleaning has just gone up. Our monthly cleaning has gone up. Programs is remaining the same. For maintenance, I am adding $500 extra. Things are just are ailing a little bit more. The building is not as new as we all think it is. It's 15 years old now. Especially, we saw a big increase in the cost of trying to maintain the large trees that sustained a lot of damage when the library was built 15 years ago. So sort of trying to nurse those along has become a priority. We're asking for a little bit more for circulating materials for both adult and children's books, $250 more in each of those lines. Office supplies are largely similar, the same. I'm asking for a little bit more in postage, which we mostly use for interlibrary loan transportation. We're hoping to add an additional stop for our interlibrary loan courier because, one announcement that I'd like to make to you guys and to anyone watching at home is that we're migrating to a new software that's going to allow all library patrons to request items from home from a pool of us plus 17 other libraries, including Brooks Library in Brattleboro and Rutland Library, so some much larger libraries. So we're expecting to see a large increase in transfers between libraries and our way more use of our courier system, which is great. It's going to it's just going to expand what is available to all of our library patrons. So we're anticipating that we'd like to add an additional courier stop to try to keep up with that. The technology needs are largely the same. Digital content, we're asking for $675 more so that we can add Mango Languages, which is a really cool language learning software. Up until this year, the Vermont Online Library, which we received from the state, we paid for it, but it was very subsidized, contained a language learning software that wasn't that good. And now that they don't offer that anymore, I'd really love to add Mango. It's probably the most frequent digital service that people were asking for before, now, and I'd love to add it. It's really great.
Multiple languages?
It's many. I can't remember how many.
It's in the 40s or 50s anyway.
Yeah. So we're expecting really good use of that product.
You had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if the school would be able to use that. If
Any
the library has access.
Any library patrons, which I think would include everybody at the school, would be eligible to sign in with their library card. I don't know I think for the schools to use it within the schools, it might be appropriate for the school to get a subscription, but any library card holder can use it from home.
And how much is
that digital content?
675 more for that particular program annually?
Yep.
For unlimited usage.
For unlimited usage, yeah. They based it on our population size. I know. They based it on our population size, so I hope they're ready for 2,600-ish people to start using it. No, I think it'll be really well used here in Putney. Medicare is up as a function of everything else. The salaries, we added the 3% cost of living increase estimate, and I also added a little bit more for a realistic amount of hours, or a more realistic amount of hours for the part-timers. Benefits is where you see the big jump. And then pretty much everything else is level, except for liability insurance, which we estimated a 10% increase. And that was, I think that's still the advice, isn't it, Karen?
What was that?
To estimate that liability insurance, which is the last expenditure line, is going up 10%.
Where am I seeing that?
Sorry, it's on the
last one.
very last.
Right down, yeah, right in there. In your shaded
right
area.
here, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not, okay, got it, yep. So, yes. It's-
That is that the reality for us, for our liability insurance
Yes.
overall?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm assuming that even though it's shown as a line item on your budget, that that's the same liability insurance we have. I mean, do we have separate policies?
I think that Cynthia was trying to tease apart the policies in order for us to bear our cost, for our portion of it. And so that's been true for, I believe, 2 years now, that it's been part of our budget instead of in,
But it's still part of our policy.
I believe so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, I'm just,
Yeah, it's broken out.
I remember, I remember us talking about breaking it out, but I
Yep,
just want to make sure that we're saving on economy of scale,
right,
basically.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as long as it's under our umbrella, that it shouldn't be more expensive. Good.
Liability.
And Kevin, you're the treasurer, is that right?
Sure, yeah.
Are you comfortable with this?
I am, yeah, I mean, I've been in libraries for 20 years and Emily does a stand-up job, fantastic job, so I have no qualms with anything.
Thanks. Not going too crazy with gold plating anything.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yes. Do you guys have any questions about the budget?
It's too bad that it's as big an increase as it is.
Yes.
But it all seems very clearly justified, that when I was looking at it yesterday and I was like, oh, wow, that's a big number. And then it's like, well, it's just what it is. And unfortunately, that's the reality. So whether, as you know, typically at town meeting, the library is not questioned much at all, if at all. But somebody may notice that increase. The fact that a large portion of it is driven by benefits is, again, unfortunate, but the reality.
Everybody gets that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And, oftentimes in the past, when the library has had significant increases in any given time, it's because of a significant change in services offered. And so that's not so much the case, so. But no, it all looks very appropriate. It's just, it ain't cheap.
It is what it is.
I wonder if Mango would offer a discount if the school decided to jump on board too.
That might be true if it's serving the same population. I'm not sure what Mango offers for schools, or even if they target, if it's really geared towards children. I'm actually unsure about that. I've only seen the demo as a sort of for adults, adult learning program, but I don't see why, especially middle school age and over, couldn't use it with the same success.
Certainly with some students anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they have a language program, but I don't think that there's a whole lot of.
Over the last few years, it's been a little disappointing for
Yeah.
some,
Yeah.
definitely.
Some like
so,
it, some don't, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So I want to bring up capital for the library,
Yeah,
because we discussed it
yeah.
last year, and it never made it into the capital plan. So in your packets, there's a spreadsheet for capital plan. There's also a sheet for the capital reserve. So in the capital reserve right now, we have $51,791.72. Of that is $15,426 for the town hall doors. So what's left is $36,365.43. On the capital plan, we have added exterior staining at $13,800.
For the library, we're talking
Yes.
about. Yeah,
Heat pumps, $24,000.
which you have some variation on the heat pump now, but you don't have,
They're cooling only.
is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and last time they repaired them, they said, we're really lucky that it was the part that, that broke because
Because
they don't
they're
make
outdated.
parts for them anymore.
Yeah.
And they, and that prompted me to get an estimate for how much it would cost to replace them.
Yeah.
Carpet replacement also for $20,400. Emily did put, what year to replace it. Because we have a reserve and the exterior staining is more of a priority. Because if we don't take care of it,
It gets worse.
it's getting worse, and we're gonna get rot, and then we're gonna be replacing shingles. And my recommendation is that, because we do have some capital reserve, is to take care of the exterior staining possibly in this fiscal year.
Next summer sometime, yeah.
Well, spring, they can
Oh,
go
in
up
this,
in this fiscal year.
2018, 20,
Yes,
whatever it is, 17.
yeah.
No, 18, 19,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
Because we're in the budgeting stage now.
yeah.
We could do a direct expense for it, but they wouldn't see that until fiscal year 20. If we would put it into the budget. So it's something to think about and not defer it any further than we already have.
Yeah. I think it's probably a good idea. The other thing that heat pumps makes me think about, I've been wondering, at least some sections of the library roof face almost due south. And I've wondered whether we should be adding some panels on those as well as on the fire department. Because even though we offset most, if not all, of our electrical usage, but if we ideally should be shifting more towards heat pumps. I mean, if we do heat pumps for the library, and in fact, we probably ought to be, this building is not ideally suited for it because it's not as well insulated as it could be. But nonetheless, in the swing seasons, as long as we had a remaining functional backup system in the swing seasons, that could significantly offset. But we're also if we're gonna do that, our electricity usage would go up. And so we would have to think about more panels, so. So we should that would be something for the Energy Committee to
And that's what I was going to
explore.
suggest.
Yeah.
Now, Emily, you were thinking how many heat pumps?
Right now we have 6, and they're 2 different sizes.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, I think the breakdown is there's 2 of the larger capacity ones and 4 of the smaller capacity ones, but I haven't really looked at that breakdown since last year when I told you guys about
Yes.
And the technology has definitely changed
Changed.
dramatically
Yeah.
since that. Whether it would be, I would guess it would be, well, I don't know how they would break it down. I'm not sure why it's broken down the way it is. You have needs for different climates in different areas or not?
It's more like some rooms are small and some spaces are larger. So I think that's the situation. Also, because we just use those for cooling, there's some that we don't generally use unless it's really, really hot.
Unless you need to.
Yeah. It would be great to have them. I know that the newer heat pumps do a great job heating as well as cooling. And I've heard Karen was talking about the great efficiency gains that the fire department has seen using their heat pumps for heat instead of because we also have oil radiant hot water floor, and that's our current heating setup. But I guess the heat pumps have been way more efficient than that.
Well, they didn't have that type of system in the fire department.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have,
They have radiant. in
They
the
do?
floor, yes.
oh, I
Yeah,
didn't think they did.
yes.
Huh, because the other thing that's getting cheaper about electricity with air exchange heat pumps for water heating might be worth exploring that as well. And I don't know, I'm not, that would again be an Energy Committee question
Right.
probably.
So,
But yes, that should be looked at definitely. Again, even if you're not using them all the time, as long as your backup system is functioning, you significantly, which is somewhat what we're doing with the fire department.
Right.
When it's 2 degrees out, those aren't gonna cut it for the fire
they're
department.
not gonna work.
So-
You'll have to rely on your oil, but,
But the newer systems, depending on how you size it, the
Right.
newer systems are actually functioning even down to 10, 12, 15 below. They get less efficient as they drop down, but so it's worth exploring, definitely.
yeah, and Emily's library budget between electric and the heat is $6,300. So the heat pumps could reduce those costs in the budget. If you're, you know,
Right, and
It
again,
could
if
be
we,
more efficient.
particularly if we
Right.
were offsetting them with photovoltaic
Right.
to a greater
Yeah.
tune, then that, you know, there would be upfront costs for that, but over the
Right.
long haul, that's gonna be a much more efficient way
Yeah.
to do it.
plus we have our next son. I don't know if we can add the library to that contract.
To which?
Next son, the solar credits.
Oh, we should be able to.
We should look into that. It's
Right.
another option, something for the energy committee possibly
Yeah, to
to look
explore.
into.
Yeah, I don't see, just because it wasn't on there initially, is that why you're?
Because they weren't a municipal building
Oh.
until just recently.
I would think that it would, yeah, I would have to guess that that would be transferable, but who
Yeah.
knows, might not be.
But we can look into that.
Yeah, no, that would be definitely worth looking into.
You know, just while I'm looking at this, what about the roof?
Well, we've talked about that. It doesn't, just driving past, it doesn't look to me like you're gonna need a roof right away.
Looking at sort of the estimated ages of everything, I think that the roof was kind of a 20-year situation. So we still have a little more time on that. These other three projects are more emergent.
Yeah. I think our thinking, what, exactly, we have that in the roof, and now that it is a municipal building.
Right.
So I guess that would be sort of a question for you as finance director, whether, like we're doing with insurance, for example.
Right.
Should we be putting, you know, 2 of that 10 that we're collecting every year into one that's designated for the library?
Right.
I don't know. That, you don't guys don't need to
We'll have
worry
to
about
look
that.
into that though. So-
Yeah. I think it also depends on time frame for other, I mean, there, you would be relatively first in line. The roof on this building was redone significantly 12 to 15, 12-ish years ago, but it's a slate roof, so it has a very long
Right.
life. Fire department was just recently
Right,
done.
right.
And the highway department, I think, has metal roofing, so it's sort of probably a non-issue. So you guys would really be sort of next in line for a roof, even though it's not right away. Hopefully, it's 10 to 15 years down the road, but it may not be that much.
But we can add it to this capital plan
Mm-hmm.
and just, you know, gauge it.
Sure. I can get an estimate for that and maybe in the,
Right.
in the springtime or in the summer, and
Yeah.
we can get it on the plan.
Yeah.
Should be a number of years out, but
Yeah, we hope.
when was the building was completed in 07?
I think we're 14 years old or we're 15 years
Is it
old.
that much, so
So
04
you're
or
getting there.
05, something like
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, you should
Yeah.
have pushing another 10 years, but you might
Yeah.
not, certainly on certain sides of it.
Right.
What is it, shingle?
It's asphalt,
Okay.
yeah, but it's a good quality architectural, so it should last at least 20 years, but
A 95-year roof on this building.
on this building, yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. Slate roofs are good,
Yeah, why don't we have them?
but they aren't cheap to start
No,
with, so.
$100,000,
Yeah.
that's an expensive roof. But when you look at the fire stations, it's a 30-year life and we paid half for it.
Yeah. Yep,
A little more than
all right.
So did you want, do we need a motion?
No, you guys
To it,
The-
are not voting on our budget, you just hear about it.
we,
No, but I meant like the
Oh, yeah.
capital reserve.
why don't we
wanna-
save that up until you sort of have a big picture, and then
And do
we,
you want me to wait? I still don't have our results from the audit. So maybe we should wait until after we get our audit and then we can see, because we might be able to add to this capital reserve, who knows?
right,
And then we can decide. Maybe
where to
it's,
put it or how.
yeah, I think it's best to wait until we have our audit in hand.
Yeah, and I think, you know, typically we sort of review everything
Everything
at
at
this
once,
stage,
okay.
and then in January, we really sort of get down to the
And start picking things.
nuts and bolts.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Wouldn't you agree with that?
I thought I had it for you.
Feel free to invite me back, I'm really happy to come anytime.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thanks for waiting us out.
Oh, yeah.
That
was a long time.
You just
That was
happened
a
to be
lot of
today.
informative information.
That's
Yes, yes.
gossip for the library. Oh, I'm at the meeting last night.
Public meeting.
Go on and on. All right, so town meeting prep.
So in your packets, there is a schedule for town meeting prep. We don't have to go through it line by line, but it's for your reference.
Let's see it.
This is a big packet
I
today.
know.
They keep shuffling pages around.
No, I had them in
It
order.
might be right underneath
Yeah,
this.
I screwed up.
It's right underneath this.
That was it.
It might be, that's where mine turned out to be.
I try to keep everything in line. There you go. So what we're going to talk about tonight is social agency allocations. And you do have a list of those in this packet as well.
Yep.
You also have a copy of the town articles from March, but that's just to give you an idea of what we should be looking at and thinking about. Obviously, any articles or petitions. The last date of file petitions for articles is January 17th. And then the last date of file petitions for office is January 28th. There's a typo on there, 2019. But, so our articles,
2 copies for some reason. Somebody else not on the copy. That's good. Sorry, go ahead.
you're fine.
I don't see my social service agency number. Where did that go?
Looks like
I
that.
know, no,
We
I
had it a minute
I
ago.
know.
Is it in this file? Here it is.
Yeah, boy, thank you. All right.
Okay, so we should discuss this. We did get all the questionnaires back. I do have them. If anyone wants to look at them, you can feel free to ask for them.
And there were no new applicants this year, is
No
that
new
correct?
applicants,
Right.
the same
Yeah.
ones from previous years.
Yep.
And just a quick
Go ahead.
overview, what do those look like? The questionnaires, what is?
But they're basically request forms for,
Right.
what your, I'm sure you, but what your mission is, why you would
How
come
many
to us
people
for
you
money, how many
served
people you serve, exactly.
in Putney.
Okay.
And usually, the history would, received X amount in the past kind of thing, so on and so forth.
And along with their questionnaires, they send us a report.
Which
the
goes
town
in
report.
town.
Yes. So they're all received at this point. The question will be, and it has been brought up again, and I do have copies of the social service policy. And if you'd like another copy, I can give you that. So Putney Cares and Putney Family Services has merged,
Right.
and they're looking for basically 2 separate allocations.
Or one allocation in twice the amount.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Now, what we did too, just recently, when we paid out the social agency allocations, we issued 2 separate checks. And of course,
For them,
yeah,
which makes sense because that's the way it was budgeted for last year.
correct.
Right.
But one of the checks got kicked back and we're gonna reissue it.
Because it's not in the right name or something?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
so, and I thought that might happen, but I did it the way it was voted on. So we're still not to the point where we're gonna know what the percentages are, because the budget's not approved yet. I do wanna point out.
Or what the numbers are.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to point out though, on this sheet here, where for the proposed social service agency contributions that did end up in the town report. Last year, Brattleboro Area Drop-In Center,
Mhm.
Morningside Shelter, Groundworks Collaborative,
Became one.
they all became one, but they only got one single
It's the same
allocation.
situation, it's a,
So it's the same situation as the Putney Cares and Putney
And I have to
Services.
disclose that that's my employer, and I can't be involved in
So,
this.
yeah, recuse yourself.
I just want to bring it to your attention
Yeah.
that we have had organizations merge. They did not come to the select board and ask for,
That's what I would say. I mean, you know, they didn't request it when we were doing this budget.
right,
They are now one entity. Would we work backwards on that? I don't know, that's a little tricky. I mean, this was, for Putney Cares and Putney Family Services, that was almost part of the discussion they were having in the question of merging or
Right,
not, because
right.
it's a significant portion of their funding.
Windham Child Care Association, no, is it Windham? Yeah, maybe not. There was one that did not request funding. I took them off this list.
They're off of here.
Yeah, but again, that was another $681, you know, so, although,
Of course, that shifts the
yeah, these,
number in the equation.
right.
These numbers are not accurate.
right, because the allocations are dispersed by percentages based off the budget.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but I mean, now it isn't really, all of these are one entity under the name of Groundworks Collaborative. So we can drop the other two names out of here just for
I will
simplicity.
this year,
Okay,
but
yeah,
I
no.
just wanted
Yeah,
them
yeah.
on
No, that
there
makes
for
sense,
your,
definitely. I just wanted to
yeah,
make sure that was appropriate to do, which I think it was.
no, I will definitely do that. And the bottom of this chart has no reference because I didn't change any of those numbers, so. But we still need to think about and what we're gonna, how we're gonna handle this. Can you answer one question? Because from history, I haven't been here long enough, but
Maybe.
it appears the social service funding was adopted by the select board. So you can make the change, or is it voters?
Well, I'm not, yeah, I guess it would be a question of how we approached making that change. You know, are we changing the policy, which would be a select board thing to do?
Right.
Or are we, at least in the short term, and I think this is sort of what, when we talked about it last, I think I was sort of proposing anyway, was at least in the short term, it's sort of explainable, but in the long term, when the memory is gone,
Right.
it might not be explainable. So how, you know, and I don't know whether, you know, it might be that the policy needs to be changed. I mean, in fact, I think it is that the policy needs to be changed. If we're gonna try to continue to fund it in the way we have been funding 4 organizations, but as 3, I wonder whether there are parallels between some aspects of these organizations that could help us formulate that, i.e. number of people served or their budget, or, you know,
Right.
it would be nice to have some guidance on, because I think we could stick with, you know, Group A receives 47% of social service agency budget,
Right.
but maybe it's not just straight up that Group A is divided evenly between the number of agencies that's in there. Group A is divided up, but then if we do that for Group A, do we do that for Group
Yeah,
B?
you set a precedent, so you have to be careful.
I don't know. Although, you know, I think Group A, because it's strictly Putney-based, has always been in a category of its own in a way. So you're right, it would be setting precedent, but we might also just say this is precedent for
Right.
Group A, and that's the way it is. You know, somebody could change that at some point,
Right.
but I don't know whether if we started trying to do it by some other measure for all of these organizations, that would get pretty cumbersome, I would think.
Yeah, I
And
recommend it.
And there may not be a logical way to fund it the way we have been based on some measurable thing, but it might be worth exploring, and I don't know.
Now might be the time.
At least to look into
I
it.
think so, yeah.
You know, I think that we can, because these are open discussions that we had throughout the year this year, I think that we can comfortably present it relatively as it is at town meeting this year as to justify it.
Right.
But and we talked about this with them, that,
Yes,
you know,
we did.
maybe they could look at whether they have ideas as to how it could be legitimized. But it is, I can definitely imagine that being a point of discussion in the future where, you know, wait a minute, how come they get this when we only get that?
Right.
Is this a similar formula used by all the towns in the area, or do we have something very different from other?
I think each town is different. It depends on the need in the municipality.
Okay.
And I think you know, this is a template, but there's probably 50 different templates around the
Yes.
state, at least. But I'm sure there's overlap in the concept anyway. I don't know though, but
It might
I
be
think
nice
some
to see
variation.
what other
Yeah, how
towns
other
do.
towns do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
If we were to do that, I would do towns surrounding Putney.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
Dummerston,
or
Westminster.
similar
Similar
demographics.
size.
Yeah.
Well, and especially surrounding Putney, because many of the organizations would be
Right.
similar, so they might,
Right.
it might be a more nuanced look at it,
Yeah,
which could
and
be
that's
helpful.
true, because Westminster could be given to the same.
They must be
organizations
funding a
for
number
that.
of these, I would
Yes,
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then Brattleboro being larger, I wonder what their percentages are.
Different set of equations.
Right,
It'd be interesting to see their approach.
It would be, yeah.
okay,
Well, yeah, and then some of these down here shift up to here,
and that could happen
Depending
too,
upon the town
Steve,
you're in.
yeah,
you know.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Groundworks
And
up there.
those, you know,
Yeah.
we, and for some, that wouldn't show up at all, because like, I know
Right.
that we serve through the Putney Food Shelf, we definitely serve people who are
Yeah.
non-Putney residents, and we're
Right.
happy to do that.
Yeah.
I
But,
think it's 26% is Brattleboro.
Is that
residents
right?
of
Yeah.
Putney Food. I might be off by a percentage or two,
but
but
it's
I know
somewhere in
it's
that
in the
range.
20.
It's not insignificant.
Yeah.
you know, Senior Solutions is another organization, you know. They serve Bellas Falls, Westminster,
Right.
Putney,
Yeah,
yeah, so,
there's overlap, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say until we have the actual numbers in front of us,
we still have
we
time,
still,
because,
we sit on it, but I
Right.
think that the formula remains the same with that one exception of how we're adapting that this year, because we committed to.
Right.
And then look at how that happens, goes forward, and it may be that we need to do that for 2 or 3 years, I don't know.
right,
But at some point, again, that's gonna get lost, so.
right. All right, so for the next meeting, I'll bring some information forward, new data. And maybe we can sort it out.
Out of curiosity, does the food shelf lease the space from the community center? Okay.
Yeah. At a very reasonable rate.
Yeah, sure. And there has been discussion about, as you may well be aware, of where the food shelf might or might not end up. You know, I think it would be great if we could figure out how to keep them at the community center, because it serves the community center
Yeah.
well too, but.
The space
there's certain-
constraints are
Absolutely,
complicated,
no
but if we
question.
could figure out a way to navigate
That
that.
would be great,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's a meaningful use of the community center, of which there are
Absolutely.
less and less meaningful uses, unfortunately, so.
Absolutely.
All right. So articles where you're just sort of reminding us that we need to be thinking about that. Is that sort of the idea of having
Yeah,
those
because
there?
those were changed, they will change.
Yes. of course.
And petitions are due like late January, you know, whether it be for an article or for an office.
Right.
You know, will be approved in the budget hopefully by, you know, maybe mid-January.
I guess actually one thing that related to that we don't need to decide tonight, but we should, I don't think we've already made this decision, have we? That whether we're gonna ask Sevitz to petition again?
Well, now it's a question too.
I
I'm
mean-
actually just gonna
My-
email Kristen today.
My feeling, we should move it in as a line item, and, you know, have that as open conversation this year, but, you know, we've had it petitioned every year for the last, no, it's been more than that, three, maybe
Because
four.
normally
Yeah.
it's a 3-year petition anyway.
No, not for
No.
this was every year.
Okay.
So they've had to come and present every year, and it ends up being a little cumbersome each year, because people's emotions about it, but it passes each year.
And I have to
Um,
say, I've been working with Broad Road Development Credit Corporation and Sevitz, because they're linked,
Yeah, yeah.
okay? And they've been helping me out quite a bit, especially with the vacant storefronts
Yeah.
here in town. And all I've been is the middle person connecting the store owner, the property owner with them.
To see
And
what assistance. they
things
can
are
do.
like shifting.
Yeah.
And I actually had an architect come in and he was asking about vacant storefronts.
Mm.
And honestly, he's looking at the brick building here on Kimmel Hill.
Good.
So I'm like, well, here's the contact.
Yeah,
It's in the village district. There's funding out there. We can make it work, but you also need to call BDCC. So I personally, I think it's a good resource for the community. We just need to educate everybody that you
that's
can go here.
that's been the hard part. And
Yes.
it's been a process
Yeah.
for the folks at Sevitz, learning how to promote themselves and disseminate the
Right.
right information.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's
Yeah.
every year, and you know, some things strike right with people and some don't, and
Right.
some people, you know, you'll have one person who stands up and says, they're not doing a darn thing for me,
Right.
and the next person stands up and says, without them, I wouldn't be in business.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's
And
like,
we heard that at town meeting.
It's complicated,
Yes,
definitely.
yes.
So,
I think that you as a town manager being able to say though they've been an excellent resource for me would be
Yeah.
an excellent thing for our community to hear.
and that was true. Cynthia did that too, and she was actually on the Sevitz board for a period of time as well, and she was a huge proponent of it. I mean, she was very comfortable that they were well worth the.
Yeah, I went to the connectivity summit in Mount Stone Friday,
Yeah.
and they were there.
Good.
Yeah,
And the resources that were in that room was incredible.
yeah, but,
And so the next summit, which is in spring, which I'll attend that one too, but I learned a lot from them.
yeah.
And they're like, oh, I'm so glad you could make it, you know, it's like, so they already know my face, and I'm like, okay, this is working.
Good.
It is working.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that one has to keep in mind is that we've been in a strong growth period for a long time now, and the economy has been strong for a long time now, and
Right.
that's not going to remain the case. And these, you know, this, we have very low unemployment, but there's no guarantee that we're going to continue to have that. So
Right.
anything that can help us with that, I
Yeah.
think is a good investment.
So
So
I would recommend to,
Put it in as a line item.
yes.
Yeah, and I think the question we had last year was, where does it fall as a line item? Because it's kind of an oddball. It's not a social service, doesn't fall in the social service budget, so.
No, but I think it's in with CRT, you know, the current.
Oh, could be,
and,
yeah.
You know, it's.
Public service,
Yes,
actually, in
yes.
fact,
With,
that
Yeah.
might be the same place to put
Right.
CATV, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that's potentially sort of a new category for us, so maybe
You
those are
could
things
put-
we look at.
You
know.
could put BCTV under town management because.
Could be,
select
'cause it's
board
meetings.
Meetings are
That's true, but it's
televised.
also school board, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
Town meeting,
again, that would
yeah.
be sort of a finance director question,
I mean,
would
I don't
say.
think, yeah, we can find a place for that.
Yeah.
But, Suds already has a line item and they are in a category, so,
Keep them in there.
yeah, I wouldn't move them.
All right. Sounds good. Citizen of the Year. We obviously won't mention any names.
No, but I did request, on Putney, so the
For
deadline is December.
Nominations.
Yes.
Good.
So December 14th is the deadline.
Yeah.
There is talk out there, so people are,
And to our viewers, please, if you have
yes,
suggestions, we're happy to entertain them.
we'll put a new plate on that plaque over there,
Yes.
because it's been 2 years.
Well, I don't think it has. I think last year we missed, but the year before, I'm pretty sure we didn't miss. I just don't think they necessarily ended up on it.
Oh, okay,
I think.
all right.
So maybe we'll
Last
move
year
the
it
plaque
sort of
down to
got-
find the name from.
Yeah, and we'll have to add some smudged out years or something.
Pamela and Daniel,
That might have
2
been.
years ago.
I'd have to look at who's
Yeah.
on there to see exactly where
I think
we
they're up
last
there
were.
now,
Oh.
so we'll look at it. But dedication, town report dedication,
Yes,
You
same
free
concept.
to-
Yeah,
think about it. And,
yeah. I mean, we certainly should be thinking about that, but there have been times in the past also where, as of January 4th or something,
Mhm.
it suddenly becomes obvious. So,
Right.
we should have names in mind, but.
So informational meetings, if we have anything that, there are any public questions about any articles that might show up, we gotta stay on top of that.
I don't have the sense at this point that we have anything that's a dramatic enough shift we usually have like a town meeting review the week before to go over articles, but I don't think we have anything significant enough as one particular article to really warrant having a public hearing for it, do we?
Gravel pit,
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, depending on how we're gonna,
right.
we don't know where
It's-
we're at with that, but
it's a
yes, that's a good
possibility.
point. Yeah,
So, I just want to remind you that we
Yeah.
may have some extra meetings.
yeah,
Last day to post the warning for the town meeting is February 3rd. So,
okay.
just take a look at the schedule, it'll keep popping up at our meetings. But,
All right. All set on item E?
yes.
Grand jurors as town officials. This was brought up, I don't know whether you guys have heard about this. Louise
Garfield.
Garfield
Yes.
Brought this up. Just as a question, she's one of our grand jurors, and she sort of said, I've been a grand juror for quite a while, and we don't do anything. Do we really need grand jurors? And so we said we'd look at it and think about it. I don't know. And I think that's something that would be voted on to remove them, or not necessarily. Do you know?
I'm not quite sure,
Yeah, so we should find that out.
but in this handout,
Yeah.
so Act 93 changed the law regarding grand jurors. So the select board, at your discretion, can decide whether,
We need them or not?
yes.
Oh, so so that means it wouldn't be a vote. I had that article a few minutes ago. Statute.
Now, I did go online to pull the statute, because according to this handout, it does list some responsibilities of the grand juror, but they're not all here. So when I went online to find out more about it, it's been repealed, so there's no information. And honestly,
Seizing forged, false, or counterfeited currency, you better lock your basements.
Yeah.
executing certain search warrants. Wow, pretty interesting.
See, some of this stuff, to me, fits for like a constable or,
Yeah, well, I think in the day there definitely was overlap there. It
Right.
would have been, sort of, you're gonna take this and I'm gonna, but,
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna send anybody out fully untrained to do any of these
right,
particular things.
How many are there?
Two.
Two?
yeah.
Who's it, Louise and who else?
East Garfield, I can't remember who the other one, it might be vacant, no, I thought it
I
was,
don't think it is vacant.
I thought it was a,
Judy Hannum is not our grand juror, she's our, anyway.
it's in the town report. I
Yeah.
just don't happen to have a town report with me.
We have enough empty volunteer spots, we don't need
Right.
spots that are useless.
Well, and, in talking to Louise about it also, and other, who else did we, I talked to somebody else about it too, but, we could look at our list of appointments, and see, it's kind of fun to have a weigher of coal.
Right, but
We really don't need one anymore.
offense viewer is important.
It can be, although
Yes.
I've never heard of them being used in our time.
Occasionally, when you have
Occasionally.
a boundary dispute,
Most
fence
of
goes
it,
up.
well, but it's almost all sheriffs at this point.
Yeah. It becomes a civil matter most of the
Exactly,
time.
so, no, and I mean, they're fun to see as a historical thing,
Right.
but, they are sort of
I think we
a
could
little bit antiquated. And,
purge some of those.
yeah, and maybe, maybe even if we have the right to just purge that, maybe that's sort of a topic of discussion for,
Mhm.
chew up a little bit of time at town meeting talking about something like that.
Well, it's difficult to get volunteers,
Right.
so some of these,
Not for fence viewer. I don't think we've ever had a vacancy in fence viewer.
I know,
Or weigher of coal for that.
Looks good on the resume.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
you know why? They do it because they know they're not
There's
getting
no
any
one.
phone calls.
Start calling them. Come weigh my coal.
No.
So we should find out exactly what the steps would be
Okay,
in order to change that if we chose to.
all right.
But yeah, I don't think I think we could look at the whole list and see what this says. Okay, capital equipment note on the fire rescue vehicle.
So I do have the note. I have People's Bank coming tomorrow, Dave Olson and Lori. I haven't met them and they're gonna be down in our area, so Alyssa and I are gonna be meeting them. This is not the actual original, so you can sign this now, or if you wanna wait.
You wanna table it?
Yeah, and
Okay.
we can do it on the 19th,
Sounds good.
because our first payment.
As long as that's not a problem for them,
No.
not due by.
Well, our first payment's not due until December 20th, 2019. So it's a 5-year note, so it'll go out to 2023 in the amount of $7,900 annually, and at 3%.
We could also just vote on that and to be signed when we have it completed.
You can do that too.
Just in case there's an issue with Peoples for any reason of them saying,
Right.
so if you want to make that motion.
And Scott Henry will also have to sign this,
Yeah,
and I can get him to sign it tomorrow.
because you'll have the right copy tomorrow after that.
Oh, actually, he'll be here Friday morning to sign
And then
things.
you'll have the right copy.
I will have the right copy, yes.
So why isn't this one right? Sorry, you may have just.
They
said that.
emailed me this.
Oh,
So the original is
Oh.
like a color,
Oh, I see,
and it's
gotcha.
on special paper.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, so we move to authorize who, Scott?
Scott Henry, well, you don't have.
Just move to,
Because we've already
approve we did, or
Did we already approve this?
we already discussed it, I don't remember, did
We
we vote on it?
did, no, we
We didn't.
discussed it, but we're gonna wait for the paperwork to
Oh, okay,
come.
so.
And then you were gonna make a motion to sign it.
So just to approve
Yeah,
that.
so
Right.
move to approve the loan, $39,500 for the fire rescue vehicle.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve a capital equipment note in the amount of $39,500 with People's United Bank at a rate of 3%. And to be signed when we have the appropriate document in front of us. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep,
Aye. All
Thank
right.
you.
Town manager's report,
I don't have much,
good.
only because, one question I do have for you though, is the pool. The building, the grounds. I did get a quote on a slide from the company that we.
Originally installed that one,
Yes.
and that was probably shocking, or not too bad.
Well, I'm thinking the capital improvement plan, we may want to add the pool
Yeah,
to that
Yeah.
list. The slide, in kind, the same one we have, maybe just a different color. $14,000 plus $2,000 for shipping and handling.
and that's not installed.
No,
Right.
Where is it coming from?
Washington State.
Oh, jeez.
Is there a special vendor, I wonder?
I'm gonna call Brad about it and see
See
whether.
what it's finding out.
I think what we should do is get a couple more estimates. and-
For
For that.
similar
slide, yeah.
units, yeah.
The thing is, we want to use the same,
Bracket.
the housing, to, just place that slide in the same place.
There isn't.
Because the footings,
There is, we could put it in the same place, but there isn't anything there that you would be presumably the concrete that's poured under there is thicker, but the pole that's the central, the
right,
structural,
it just sits there.
it just goes right in.
Okay.
So, I think,
See, what I'm
Hey,
trying to
go-
avoid is like getting something that doesn't just slide right back in there, because you're gonna have to,
which may not even, did they say it would adapt to what's
Yes,
there?
yes.
They did? So yes, that would be,
Mhm.
although, there's a good possibility that anybody else selling one is just gonna come with a, whatever, 16 by 16 plate with a series of bolts, which would be easy, that would work too. So
to get through the concrete without.
you just have to
cracking it.
drill it and,
All
yeah,
right.
because I'm sure that particular section of concrete is reinforced, I would assume.
Yeah, there's one corner
I'm
that.
sure. You would, we
has-
could have Brad,
I know,
Brad
I
King,
get
actually, I wouldn't be
nervous,
surprised if Brad
it's-
knew.
Because it is an asset for the town,
Oh, yeah,
the pool.
yeah, no question.
And people enjoy it, and,
Yeah,
we
Yeah.
need to figure out how we're gonna fund
Yeah.
this slide, and hopefully have one in the spring.
well, as I said before, the existing slide, we can definitely get some time out of it. There's no question. But we should, in a capital plan, maybe we should be looking at X number of years down the
Right,
road.
and the building, the floors
Exactly.
and whatever else that building needs.
Yeah,
And maybe a fresh coat of paint, inside the actual pool. Because it is chipped
which we
in.
did not too long ago, but it doesn't last that long.
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So I'll get a couple more quotes on slides. And we'll pull a package together and see what we have.
Sounds good.
That's all I have for my town manager's report.
All right, warrants.
Moving along.
Yeah, we're picking up the pace now.
Okay.
All right, then I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Alyssa. Payroll warrant dated December 7th in the amount of $6,353.75.
We didn't talk about this. Is there a specific reason this is?
Oh, that's something I wanted to bring up for
Okay.
additional business or other business.
Oh, there.
Why are there two for these guys?
You know why? Because they opt out of the insurance,
Oh,
so there's like a stipend, $250.
gotcha.
So that's.
So that's just a one-time?
It's once a month.
Once a month?
Yep, because they don't have
Agents.
town
I see what you're saying.
insurance.
Yeah.
That will change too.
And does that show as taxable?
I don't believe so. Well, we do take
I mean, if it's,
taxes
I was
out
gonna
of
say.
it.
'cause if
Yeah, we
it's
do
supposed to
take
be
taxes out of
250.
it.
Oh, interesting.
Lenny actually is going on town insurance as of January 1st.
Yeah.
So when you,
Encourage him to use that electronic deposit. Not that he has to, but.
we already had that discussion.
Everybody's going on it. If I remember.
Exactly.
Why
No,
don't I
I mean,
know?
you know, it's
Yeah.
just, since something's changing, it's an opportunity to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, we are already brainstorming.
How to encourage that.
It's a good time, beginning of the year,
Well,
start it new.
yeah, I mean, it might alleviate some other things, which will be good if everybody has direct deposit. But we did talk to Tom about the on-call, and any part-time people, seasonal, will go direct deposit because it doesn't require signature on the check from your treasurer. So,
Yeah, the only, yeah,
You just include the form in your hiring packet,
Right.
you know, just fill
Right.
this out with
Yeah.
everything else.
yeah,
we're having a
Places
conversation,
don't
but
even make a
it's
choice.
been.
A lot of places
Exactly.
say we're doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we should actually maybe find out about that, whether we can just implement it.
The only
as
issue would be
a
for
change.
somebody that doesn't
Doesn't have
have
an
a
account.
bank.
Yeah, no, and I think,
There's always
you
going
know,
to be somebody that won't, like when you're first hired, you have to go through
Right.
the pre-note process, so.
Right.
Occasionally, there will be a check written for payroll because it has to be.
Because there's a reason, right, no, and I would say that may well particularly be true, for example, for on-call firefighters. I mean,
Yes.
You know,
Once a
somebody
month,
who's not,
Yeah,
you
once a
know,
month we
necessarily
get this
here.
big batch.
Yeah.
And then Tom was on vacation last week and
Right.
the checks were sitting
Sitting
there.
there, right,
And it's like, direct deposit, they would have been in the accounts, they would have been fine.
And they're aware that a lot of times you can eliminate any bank service fees. You know, if you use direct deposit, sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
you know,
there
They
are
offer
incentives.
banks,
Yeah.
yeah, banks do
So-
offer.
And they're aware of
incentives.
that, I mean, some of the,
I'm not sure if they are, but,
it's another 20
Yeah.
bucks or more in your pocket.
Right.
you know,
Possibly, yeah,
Possible, yeah.
yeah,
yeah, I'm just gonna
okay. So.
stay on target.
Accounts payable dated 12/5 to 12/7 in the amount of $34,767.75. Of course, we had,
Better than last week.
yeah, well, that was 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and then I pushed more through this week. But, we're caught up now.
We have next week off, right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Who has next week off?
good. Well, just from this.
That's why
Yeah.
tonight's is extra long.
Yeah.
Yeah, December 19th will be the next meeting.
Oh, they're gonna. It's gonna get longer.
So again, some of these are, what was it, tax
So bring the snack.
rebates.
Yes,
Or-
yeah, overpayments on taxes. I'm hoping that's the end of it, Steve.
Yeah, we'll,
Yeah, because everyone should have had their homestead exemptions
mhm.
by now. But I know the state has
Is that what those will
problems.
be for?
Yeah, because they ended up paying. And then
Oh.
we received the reimbursement. Because the state pays us directly,
Uh-huh.
not the property owner. So-
And then that's why your tax bill gets adjusted too.
Right.
It's not property owner.
Probably last year. has transferred. Because they sold their
Yeah.
house.
I asked that question, I said, how do I know that these people I'm writing this check for still own
Not
that house and should be
either,
getting it?
partially, no,
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Which one is it? Can you flag that?
Yeah. Just whether that's where that payment should be going, as there was a,
Yeah, because I,
no, this is public information, so it's a question of whether Hans Estrin
yeah,
is the taxpayer. It's listed as Hans Estrin, whether it would be him or his wife Zoe Parker that was the owner of the house and therefore the recipient of the tax payment.
okay.
That would just be worth making sure. I don't know. But that house is also transferred.
That's gone
It's
to.
been sold.
Sold.
The other thing I don't know, which is possible, Steve, is that I don't know that he doesn't own more than one piece of property.
Yeah.
Right, we'd have to look
I'm
at
not
the
sure.
address.
But it would be worth looking
Because
at.
it is
Yeah.
specific
To the
parcel.
address,
Yes,
yes.
yeah.
And it's primary residence, so I would think
Right.
actually in that case, it shouldn't be able to be a different place. I don't know, it's a good question.
That's a good point, Josh. It is primary.
Primary residence,
Yes,
I don't know. And that may be out of our scope, but since it came in front of us,
Is it
Good
actually, I
question.
think it's in that packet, actually.
in
Yes,
here,
yeah, because we have to request the credit, it goes through the system. And we also did a check request, but it should give you the address.
Anyway.
Can I? Thank you. Sorry. Not to
it
keep-
should be an even number, a low even number on
The
this.
problem is that the different modules don't necessarily talk to each other.
Right,
And so
one can
it
see
may
it
have
this way.
sold, right, and then I go to
Right,
give the person this money and it's the wrong name, you know, like, a lot of research, I think,
That's-
has to go into.
Is that his primary residence?
It
56 West Hill?
was,
Mhm.
so, but you just want to see
Who it goes to.
exactly. Because this is this is no longer a married couple.
Oh, okay, yeah. We can't,
That may not be your issue.
it's not.
I don't
It's
know,
like,
yeah.
We'll look at the download that
That's-
we got from the state. And just-
Yeah, I mean, it's what, if the state is
Right.
saying that's where it goes, then
Right.
that's where it goes.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, may well be none of our business, but again,
It's
it
between you
came
two.
in front of us.
between the two
Yeah.
of them. But I'll hold this. up
Well,
and look at it.
yes, although
Yeah.
the question, who's the primary,
Who's the owner?
who's the listed owner?
Who pays bills?
And when that ownership was established, would
Right.
also be a question for that year,
Would
but
would it also be who was the person who filed the taxes?
Well, they
Whose
could've
income
been-
is it filed on?
Both
well,
of
that
them
would
could have
be,
been.
exactly.
Right,
But, and then
then
you're right, in
things
that
happen,
case,
yeah.
it's probably up to them to sort, I don't know.
Right.
You should just make sure that it's,
Mhm.
yeah, because if both
that it's
names
right
are-
on our end.
Right,
If
right.
both names are on it, then,
It's good,
On the check?
on the download from the state.
Oh. Well, maybe if both names are on the check, that would solve the problem. You know what I mean?
if
Because-
it's
because
both
one
names
person-
on the download, it probably should be both names on the check.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that's, in fact, that's how it works. When I've gotten this, I can't go to people's and
Yeah.
deposit that check without Alice being present.
Oh,
So-
right, yeah.
And/or,
Oh, listen, we'll look at
Verify.
the check.
Yeah.
I think you have it over
I
there.
noticed it.
oh, you do.
I mean, I noted it.
Hope we're not stepping way out of our bounds here. Let's see.
No, this is good, you're looking at things and you're questioning it.
That is check number, yeah. Oh, to the order of both.
Okay.
So,
Very
so
good.
Yep,
moot point.
okay.
Yeah.
No, it's good that you
Well, I'm just
questioned
curious,
it.
I don't know how all this stuff
Yeah,
works.
no.
Yeah.
That's
Unless
good.
they actually sold. Did they actually sell the house though?
Yeah.
Since then?
It sold in last year. So,
that's what I
like
forgot.
last summer?
Summer, yeah.
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 July, August.
Yeah, and that would, yeah, I can't, it's funny how that works too, because we talked about that with listers at one point too, that the previous owner is responsible even when it takes their summer
Right.
off. I was surprised that it was the way it was, but anyway.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for warrants.
Yep.
Other business?
Yeah, just simply that, it was too late to get it on today, but Kathy Bartlett came to me, the White Whitney Fund. This is a copy
Of which she's a board member.
Right, they need to update the bylaws,
Oh,
as you'll see, because on the,
She talked to me about that today.
several of the people are no longer living that are mentioned in here as people who need to see stuff.
But it's their group that does that. It's kind of like the cemetery commission, correct?
Right.
So they'll revise and amend
And
their,
then they're gonna bring those to the next meeting, I think.
yep, and I let her know that, yeah, you can bring them in front of the select board. It's good for them to, you know,
boy,
stay
wow, that is,
on top.
Yeah, so some of them are weird too.
well, it's just surprising to me that specific names.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What,
yeah,
at that time, that must have been the logic that, you know, just about anything we come up with these days has no names on it for exactly that reason, but interesting. But yes,
so yeah, it's last revision was 1994, so.
yeah, no, I mean, those are, I don't think any of, I know two of those people I know.
Yeah.
I don't think, yeah,
Like typewriter.
good old, yeah, don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
She just wanted to make people aware of it.
okay,
That would be
that
coming up.
it is in the process, but we haven't had, so, yeah, we haven't had one
I'll check
come
it's in our mail.
recently,
No.
so, yeah, all right. Do we need an executive session?
No, we do not.
But
Good.
speaking of that, do we want to mention the letter that came to
Oh,
us?
yes, we do. Just wanted to mention that our topic of discussion in executive session last week was a complaint letter from Deborah Goldman, who lives on
Priest Drive.
Priest Drive, and it was not dissimilar to letters that we have received from her in the past in pointing out specific deficiencies that she believes are present. And
I have a call into her.
we tend to, or I certainly don't tend to agree with her opinion of some of the deficiencies she points out, which are related to maintenance of our roads and the superintendent of highways, Brian. And it was discussed in executive session because it was a targeted complaint against a specific person, and we felt that that was an employment issue. And so we won't discuss the details of that, but that letter is of public record if people want to see it. But we didn't take any action and don't feel there's any action necessary as a result of the letter.
I did drive down there just to take a look and didn't really see anything that I found to
Highlighted to
be
you.
alarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. If nothing else, next meeting date, December 19th, and motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good, thank you all.